And the bed zigzag like stairs, and the engine underneath my feet. So they, they built so the engine would go under all the safety stuff. It was amazing.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for quieting down before we start the meeting in a minute or so. Just remember, everyone in here is a fellow citizen. I expect everybody to be civil. When it comes time for public comment, one at a time, 3 minutes limit, and no repeats. So once again, let's be civil and have a meeting that we can be proud of. I now call the meeting of the Archer Planning and Zoning Board to order. It is now 6:01.
When you speak.
Make it turn red?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you only have them on when you.
If everyone would please rise, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We have a full complement of our board, which means we do have a quorum. So any business taken care of tonight will be official. Before we begin, before we begin anything else, we have a new member of the board that needs to be sworn in. I turn it over to the attorney.
All right, I'm going to have you stand, raise your right hand, and then tell me how to pronounce your last name.
Hanchy.
Hanchy. All right. One minute. Gotta make sure I remember. Got confident there, thinking I was going to have it memorized. All right. Repeat after me. I,
I,
insert your name,
Don Hanchy,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
protect,
protect,
and defend the Constitution
and defend the Constitution
and the government of the United States
and the government of the United States
and of the state of Florida,
and of the state of Florida,
and uphold the city of Archer codes,
and uphold the city of Archer Code.
that I am duly qualified to hold office
I am duly qualified to hold office
under the Constitution of this state
under the Constitution of the state
and under the rules of the city of Archer,
and under the rules of the city of Archer.
and that I will well and faithfully perform
I will well and faithfully perform
the duties of a planning board member
the duties of a planning board member.
on which I am about to enter,
I didn't catch that last part.
on which I am about to enter,
On which I am about to enter,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thanks. At this point, thank you. At this point, I'd like to ask the board to read over the minutes of the last meeting, the March 7th meeting, and make a motion that they be accepted or amended.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from the March 7th, 2024 meeting. This is Linda Kosicki.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are official. There's only one big piece of new business, and that's why you all are here. We are about to discuss resolution number 2024-03 for a conditional use permit for a concrete batch plant within an industrial 1 zoning district. This will be a quasi-judicial part of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak as a public will need to be sworn in, and I will now let you guide this thing.
Happy to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, the first item of business is that I will read the title of the resolution into the record, and then we'll go from there. Resolution number 2024-03, a resolution of the Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Archer, Florida, recommending to the City Commission of the City of Archer, Florida, approval of a conditional use permit for a concrete batch plant within an industrial I zoning district, as provided within Table 16.06, Item 4.2 of the Land Development Code on certain lands within the corporate limits of the City of Archer, Florida, repealing resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. All right, Mr. Chair, at this point, I will ask if any members of the board have any conflicts regarding this item.
Would you like me to read a letter I've just received?
You may,
Okay.
if
Turn your
it's
microphone on,
responsive.
please.
Pardon me?
Microphone?
I gotcha.
There you go.
Okay. At the city commission meeting, there was a reporter outside, and people were talking about they were so opposed to this plant. I have a passion for Archer. I have a passion to see our city grow. I want to see good things coming to Archer, and I think Mr. Arnold is a very good businessman, and I'm certainly willing to listen to his proposal. And I think that it's just going to be nothing but something good. Anyway, I spoke to the reporter, and I told her, you're only hearing from people who are opposed to this. I want to tell you what I think, and I told her about the jobs. If it's only 12, it's living wage jobs. That's what I told her. I have a letter here, though, that is a complaint from a citizen that I should step down. Okay, the other letter is from Tanya Dean, and my name is Tanya Dean. I have worked tonight. I'm blue collar. I recently purchased a house here, which would not have
Just
done
one
had
moment, Ms.
it
Green.
been disclosed.
I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you, but I was under the impression that this was specifically about your potential conflict.
This is the reason for it.
The reason for your conflict?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well then, I apologize.
This is the
Continue.
reason that they're proposing this. This is why this has come. And she's talking about a cement plant, y'all. And this is what I keep telling people. We have a farmer's market, and I
Miss
see
Green.
lots of people every week, and they come up to me and say, you know, there's going to be a cement plant across there. Well, there's not.
Miss Green, just briefly, is this about your specific conflict of interest, or is this
So
about
she
why
says.
it's being proposed? Okay, so she says,
She
but
says.
according to you, your
I
conflict.
think I'm conflicted.
I'm asking you to disclose what your potential conflict is. So what is your potential conflict?
Well, I'm just telling you what people are saying. Mine would be speaking to the reporter, as you say. Or when somebody comes up to me and says there's going to be a cement plant across the street, and I happen to know the difference, and I say, no, it's not.
Okay,
And
so
that's not a conflict of interest.
let's put on the record just a couple of things. Do you have any relation to anyone that could have a pecuniary interest in the outcome of this cement plant or this
Like
concrete
DNA?
plant? Are you related to anyone?
My DNA, no.
Not in your DNA. Do you have a family relation?
Not with this project.
Okay. There has been some discussion and an allegation that we need to flesh out on the record, which is that your husband, I believe, is involved with a company that would directly financially benefit from this concrete
I
batch
don't think
plant.
so.
Okay. Where does your husband work?
He's retired.
Okay. Do you have any other relatives that work for any construction companies or have any interest in construction companies financially? You do? Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about that?
What do you want to know?
Just describe what their interests
Mr.
are.
Arnold, does any of Arnold Construction know anybody that I'm related to that might be involved in concrete, like Green Construction? They don't. There's no conflict there.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that Mr. Arnold knows them. It's so I'm not trying to be confrontational
I
with
think
you,
so.
Mrs. Green. I'm just trying to get onto the record the facts so that we can have a good conversation here tonight. Okay? So the question is, are you related to someone that has a financial stake in any construction company?
He owns one.
Okay. Because of that, my recommendation is that you recuse yourself from the vote on this based on the potential special pecuniary gain that you may have in this item.
Oh, brother, I won't have any gain in this except the city will benefit from it and maybe some people will have some jobs.
And I
That
do
will be
want-
the benefit to me.
And I do want to clarify that this doesn't mean that you can't voice those opinions as a member of the public. This is just my recommendation based on your relationship with someone who could potentially financially gain from this plant coming to the city.
Everybody in here could gain. Everybody. Anybody that wants a job, they could gain from this project because we're going to have jobs coming to Archer. This doesn't make any sense, but I won't vote, y'all, because I would be in favor of it. This is why they're doing this. Just take note, Archer. I have a passion for the city, and I want us to move forward, and I hope that people will listen to the report.
Everyone,
done.
let's calm down.
I'm done.
Okay,
I'd like to say something,
So-
Margaret.
Not now.
not yet.
Let's go.
We'll get hot here.
Okay. All right, so because you've made that decision, the proper action would be then to step out into the audience during the conversation about this vote.
Oh, I'd be glad to. I can talk more down there than I can up here.
Absolutely, as is your right. Okay. Mr. Chair, the next question. I'm sorry, I've got you trapped in here. Oh, I've made it worse. All right. Is there anyone else that has any potential conflicts regarding this item? Anything that anyone needs to disclose regarding ex parte communications? Ex parte communications, as a reminder to the board, is any conversation that you have had regarding this item outside of a public meeting. So if you have already discussed it in a public meeting or you attended a public meeting, that is not an ex parte communication. If you have discussed it with someone outside of a public meeting, you do need to disclose. Anyone?
Yes, I
Okay.
have disclosure. I have spoken to Karen and Brett Fiore. I've talked to Charlie Squires, and I've talked to Jed Mitchell.
And what generally was the content of those
They
conversations?
asked me questions. I said I had an open mind. I'm trying to listen to pro and con.
Okay, and can you certify for this board that any decision you make tonight will solely be based on the information that's presented to you under oath in this
Absolutely.
hearing? Okay. Anyone else?
Sean Willis, Vice Chair. Just as before, numerous members of the public coming up and wanting to talk to me about it. And I reminded them all that it is a quasi-judicial meeting, and if they wanted me to listen to them, that they needed to attend the meeting tonight.
All right, and can you just affirm for this board that any decision you make tonight will be solely based on the evidence presented to you under oath in today's meeting?
Yes.
All right, anyone else?
I was contacted via email to sign a petition against the concrete plant. I told them I could not sign the petition, nor could I comment on the subject because it would be coming before us this meeting. And I've had a person sign me up for a Facebook group that was pretty much against everything, and I found out and immediately had him remove me.
All right, and just for consistency across, will you certify that any decision you make tonight will solely be based on the information presented to you under oath in today's meeting?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Chair, you're the only one left.
Okay. Is your entire preamble completed?
Yes, as long as you don't have any ex parte, okay? And then I'll just swear anyone in that intends to speak. We'll swear everyone at the same time.
First, I'd like to open the floor to the city manager, Mr. Hammond.
I have no comments, wait for the attorney.
Oh, okay, you just, all right, well then we're off and running.
All right. Don't everyone all stand up at once, but anyone who plans to speak to this issue, if you will please stand and raise your right hand. All right, speak loudly because I'm going to go around the room and have you say your name so that our clerk can take them down. Deanna, if you cannot hear me, please let me know. Okay, let's start here.
Anne Green,
Chris Camille.
Chris Gamir, Ann Green,
Sarah Brannon,
Sarah Brannon,
David Norton.
David Norton,
Norton.
Norton,
Rhonda, sorry,
Norton,
Rhonda Robertson,
Rhonda Robertson,
yes. Denise Donaldson,
Denise Donaldson,
Ronnie Arnold.
Ronnie Arnold,
Gene Arnold.
Jean Arnold. Don't sit down yet. I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to have you all swear in at the same time. Back there.
Chandler Ash,
Chandler Ash,
David McSherry.
David McSherry,
Jennifer Philpott,
Jennifer Philpott,
December McSherry,
December McSherry.
Gail Malini, Rose Aslanian,
Okay, say that. So those again, louder.
Rose Aslanian,
Rose Aslanian,
Gail Malini,
Del Malivi,
Lisette Conde,
Lisette Condet,
Lori Costello,
Lori Costello,
Roberta Lopez,
Roberta Lopez,
Karen Fiore,
Karen Fiore, Brett Fiore. Okay,
William Lewandowski.
William Lewandowski,
Brenda Skinner,
Brenda Skinner,
Lisa Renshaw,
Lisa Renshaw,
Lori Bernardo,
Lori Bernardo,
Jessica Ray,
Jessica Ray,
Robert Kosicki,
Robert Kisicki,
Adam Andre,
Adam Andre. Anyone else? All right. Do you all swear or affirm the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You are all duly sworn. Thank you for obliging me, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, let's open it up to comments. Everyone that's been sworn in, I don't know how we're gonna decide what order you're going in.
So,
I
Mr.
have a
Chair,
question. Is there anybody in the lobby or outside that needs to be sworn in as well?
If someone comes in that hasn't been sworn, I'll keep an eye on it, and
Okay,
Deanna
I'm just
will be
not
helping
sure
me.
if there's anybody outside or not.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, actually, the first order of business would be to allow either staff, or if staff doesn't have a presentation, then to allow the applicant to make their presentation
Okay,
on the item.
all right, then, Mr. Arnold, you're up.
well, my engineer. Yes.
Okay, please state your name, everybody, before you speak, state your name clearly in front of the microphone.
Hello, Mr. Chair. My name's Chris Gamir. I'm the civil engineer that's heading up the application for this, the use permit on the property here. We do have a presentation, and I may invite Mr. Arnold and others to speak during the presentation and to contribute certain portions to it along the way of the presentation. And this time we have official full presentation for you all, and it's being mimicked on both the front and rear screen here, the exact same thing for everybody at the same time here. So we all know why we're here today. We're proposing a concrete batch plant at the Historical Maddox Foundry and Machine Works at this site there. So you can go to the next slide. So who are the people doing this project? Well, they've been here since 2010, running a construction company out of the city of Archer, employing people in this entire city. They started R.E. Arnold Construction in 1989, operated by their family, Ronnie himself, his wife, and his 3 sons in the business, and they made a name for themselves in the construction industry for 35 years, doing tons of site work on projects that I've designed, that FDOT has permitted, all across this whole North Florida area. And they do a really great job, and they come and they operate out of the city of Archer with all of the employees and equipment that come from all of the services being served out of the city of Archer. And so they purchased this Maddox Foundry and try thinking of ways to keep it living, to keep it going as a stakeholder of this community. Go ahead to the next slide. So in the City of Archer Land Development Code, 15.05, it states that the industrial heavy district, and that's what we are heavy industrial district as zoned as currently existing on the site, is designated primarily to accommodate manufacturing, which is what's being proposed here, and heavy industrial activity. So that involves all the movement of equipment on the site. So we are allowed by right on this property. And the only reason why we're coming to you for conditional use permit is to make sure that we meet the performance standards. And that's why this is a quasi-judicial process. It's not about whether we want it here or not, whether we prefer it here or not. It's already allowed on the piece of property, but instead we're here to talk about, do we meet the performance standards? And what we're going to go through, not every single tiny detail of performance standards, but all the big ones that we've heard from the community that they're concerned about, to make sure that we've demonstrated to you all that we provided the reports that both your city staff, their hired reviewers like Kimberly Horn, et cetera, and the regional, North Florida Regional Planning Council have reviewed all these materials and haven't identified any insufficiencies with us meeting those performance criteria as listed in your code, specifically section 17. So we'll be getting to those in more detail as well, and I have a section sort of describing those standards as well. So if we continue on to the next slide. So, for example, the conditional use permit application demonstrates how your proposed use will meet those criteria. So it will exceed the land development code requirements, specifically performance standards in section 17. We will meet and exceed the public health safety requirements that may adversely impact the health and safety welfare of the surrounding community area. That's listed in the code as well. We will not adversely impact the quality of life or property values in the vicinity of the site and the Maddox Foundry. I mean, this was a foundry facility that was melting metal, casting giant pieces of mining equipment on that property for 100 years. They made bombs during World War II. They made all types of equipment, as can be seen just walking through that facility, and of course you all living with this facility for these many years. It's also consistent with the character of the existing land use patterns in the surrounding area. The Maddox Foundry has been there, and it has significant history with that industrial use on this site. It's not like it's been anything else. It's always been in heavy industrial use on that property, and we're not proposing to change that. We're continuing along with the history of that site as is. And that also demonstrates how we've complied with the City of Archer comprehensive plan. So again, we're coming to you today just to demonstrate that we meet the performance standards. We are allowed use on that property as is by your code. Next slide. We're not proposing a cement plant. So I know this, I mean, if you do any sort of lookup on the internet, the people who care a lot about concrete and cement go crazy when you mix the two up. And in this case, it means whether or not we're something that's really large and huge, like a cement plant. So the closest example is the one in Newberry, Argo Cement Plant, where they dredge lime rock right out of the aquifer there. They cook it at super high temperatures with all the control systems there needed to do that. And this is a picture of that plant. And I'm just making it really clear that is not what's proposed here, okay? They deal with a lot of chemicals, a lot of emissions, tons of controls on their system, which makes it super huge, and there's nobody anywhere near around them for that specific reason. And again, we're not proposing that. You know, the misinformation we've been hearing is about this is going to be a huge facility. It's mining lime rock, you know, and it has to deal with all this emissions from the kilns that would have to cook something like that. Well, that's cement. So let's talk about what we're actually proposing. So go to the next slide. A concrete plant, okay? And all that means is we take silos that have the cement in a enclosed silo, we take sand from a hopper, we take rock from a hopper, and we take water. The cement truck pulls right up to the device. They're sitting on a scale that weighs them. As each component of the cement is added through conveyor belts and the specific hoppers directly inside the truck, so it's not like we mix it outside and then put it in the truck. It goes directly in the truck. And just like you're making a cake, You know, if you're trying to follow the really accurate recipes, they're weighing the truck and they're saying, we need a half a ton of this, a quarter ton of this, some extra sand. All right, let's add water till we get the final mix amount. All right, this truck is good. And right on the point in which they're putting it into the truck, it's completely shrouded with vacuums going to the filter system on the truck. And we'll get more into that later because it's fascinating how they filter and everything that goes involved with these concrete batch plants. And you see, this is the layout. And even since our last meeting, hearing from everybody, we've now increased the buffer to the south more than we even were required to because we want to be helpful to the community. Okay? So you can see there's a large green area at the south of the site there. And on top of that, we've now added an 8-foot high berm, if I remember correctly. That's the light green line you see around the north, the west, and the south on that little description there, little concept plane there.
How tall?
We'll get into that later. I have a separate slide just about the berm, sir, Mr. Chair. All right, let's go to the next slide. So talking about what a concrete batch plant does. I already talked about measuring and how it deposits the sand and rock and cement directly into the truck. The proportions, depending on what mix they're doing, you know, if they're doing a 3,000 PSI mix or doing some other kind of mix for a different use, they then weigh those into the truck, different amounts, different quantities there to get the right mix that they want, to get the slump that they want, air content into the mix that they want, and it's directly mixed inside that truck. It's fully contained inside that truck. And then let's talk about the water. Water was another big item that was a concern there. You know, it sounds like a lot that every cubic yard that goes into that truck needs 20 gallons of water to go with it. And each truck can carry 10 cubic yards within it. So that sounds like a lot to put 200 gallons of water inside that truck. All right? On top of that, when they get to the job site to drop off that concrete, they'll sometimes mix a little bit extra water in there to get some more change and flow to that concrete when they get on the site. So they'll typically carry about 150 gallons of water in a tank on the truck by itself. So, but they won't use all of that. So let's just say we're talking about, 300 gallons, okay, that gets used. Well, I designed more than just concrete batch plants. Matter of fact, I've only designed 2 in my whole career here, okay? But I've designed hundreds of restaurants. I've designed hundreds of other facilities, offices, all types of facilities. And you can compare one truck at 300 gallons with just 5 seats in a restaurant. Because the restaurant has to get started, prep all the food, wash everything down. As they're prepping it, they're cutting it up and everything, okay? You then have the preparation of putting on the plate. You then have the customer comes in, they go to the restroom. They use other kinds of water in the building. They come out and they sit down. And we'll design a restaurant with 60 seats. Well, every 5 of those seats, you can think about the use of one truck at a site. So we're talking about very little water on top of that. And there's also other opportunities where we're going to be using recycled water with the concrete truck as well. And we'll get into that a little further whenever we do truck washout. So if we go into the next slide. So people are worried about the city of Archer running out of water. Well, your staff already thinks about that. They have in all that packet a concurrency report about how much capacity the city has, how much is being used, and how much is remaining left over. So I excerpted certain paragraphs out in there. So the city of Archer has 1 million gallons of potable water capacity permitted for you all. You're currently using about 109,000 gallons of potable water of your permit. So you're only using just over 10%. So of your permitted capacity, you have about 85% remaining. So we're using a tiny percentage of the city of Archer's water capacity. You have plenty of capacity for this facility. We're not using barely any water. When you think about it, compare it to a restaurant, and when you compare it to the capacity you have in your system. All right? We can go to the next slide. Oh, and this was substantiated by your staff as well. So let's talk about existing site and soils. All right? So people are also worried about, oh my gosh, we're going to contaminate the soils. Again, they're thinking about a cement plant and not a concrete batch plant. At a concrete batch plant, we're dealing with inert materials. These are going to be the concrete floors and steps that you walk on to go inside your house. We're past any concerns of the processing to create cement. We're now talking about the actual mixing stage. So we had a local engineer come. They did a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental survey with testing and report that was provided of this whole property, all right? We had stormwater borings done because we have to have a whole stormwater component to this design. And they did testing of the soil types. We actually have really high clay soils in this area. So that would even keep any sort of contaminants from even getting through the soil surface very easily on this site. And we have multiple levels of stormwater ponds in a row providing treatment at all those different points along the stormwater train, if you would like to call it that. Then, part of your standards, because again, we're showing how we met your performance standards, they wanted to do an environmental survey of possible impacts to federal and state protected species and essential habitat. You would think this would be something sort of common sense. You know, it's an industrial site. It's been that way for 100 years. But we still went through that process and had them come and do a survey on the property of any endangered species, and there aren't any on the site at all. So we don't have any impacts to it.
How can there be? You clear cut it. How can there be any habitat?
Yeah,
It's gone.
We understand, ma'am. And then the Regional Planning Council, which you hired to review your packages, and your city of engineer, Kimberly Horn, reviewed our package and had no exceptions to any of the items we presented in our report. We met the standards. So moving on to the next slide. So this is our plan. You can see at the gray area in the middle, that's the main area where all the vehicles will be moving around there. You can sort of see the E-shaped sort of bins. We call them bins. They're facing down towards the bottom of the page. Those are actually walls that give you sort of 3 walls, and that's where you're storing the sand and the rock as you need to scoop it up and then take it to the concrete mixer. That's where you store it. That's where you keep it wet because you need it to be wet for your mixing process. And then to the south there, you see that sort of light gray area and those 2 dark green areas next to it. So that is actually a settlement pond where when you have trucks come back, you have to wash them out. You can't just let the concrete stain them because they'll set up. And it's so much of a inert process that you just wash it out. It flows into, and I'll show you examples of it. I have some video of them being installed, and also pictures of other concrete batch plants where the water moves through the whole trench and settles out so that we can actually recycle that water and dispose of the washout that's from the other trucks. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question on the I call them silos that have the powdered cement in them.
Yes, sir.
How are those reloaded, refilled?
You know, I don't have that question. I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
And also too, we've been looking at different options, and now we're looking at a new design where it's not that, you've probably seen some examples, and I have some pictures of one where they're really high, tall silos, but then some of the newer systems that have a little bit more flexibility of how you orient them on the site have horizontal silos. So they're way shorter, and I have pictures of those as well that we're proposing to use on the site. So I'm not sure of the exact loading of the cement into them. Would you have an idea of how they get delivered?
Absolutely.
If that's a question, or do you want to wait till later?
I'll answer anything like that.
Yes, sir. So we'll have pictures of that, and then I'll have you come describe that, Mr. Arnold. All right. So we're doing a concrete mix plant, and then as part of the buffer we want to provide, we have the light green band that going on the south, the west, and the north. Okay, that's going to be a tall berm that I'm going to show you more details about in a later slide. You know, to buffer us from all the uses around us. And then you see in the top area those 3 large dark green areas. That's the stormwater pond that we need to meet current criteria for stormwater runoff that doesn't exist today. That is completely on the edge of allowing a big major flood to come and flood Archer Road in a major hurricane event. So it turns out that FDOT, when they were installing some storm pipe down Archer Road, right in front of the Maddox site, I guess they never got rights to make an FDOT stormwater pond at the lowest end of the site. You see, that's where those 3 dark green areas, that's the lowest part of this whole drainage area. And I have a separate photo showing how much water is draining to this little area here, because that may seem really large. Matter of fact, my client was upset with me when he saw how large these stormwater ponds were, considering it. But then when I show you a little bit later on with a separate slide, what's coming to this area, it's amazing FDOT hasn't done something about this before. They ran pipes down Archer to the west, came to near where the church was, and the pipes didn't go anywhere. As a matter of fact, they're now filled with silt along the entire City of Archer Road. And part of our permitting process is the stormwater pond on the south side of the road, the dark green area on the south side, is going to be a little bit elevated, and that's going to remain the Maddox stormwater pond. And then the stormwater ponds on the north side of the road, FDOT is going to have an easement over those to be their stormwater ponds. And it's going to serve a giant area, as I'll show in a separate slide. So we're hiring between 15 to 25 employees at this plant. I have some video of how those operations work to show how it will function, to show how we have all drives from those people coming on the site, from all the drivers to the operators, etc. And we've decided to locate this plant on the western portion of the site because it sort of allows for that northeast corner, because the Maddox goes all the way up to the intersection with Archer Road and 270th there. And that allows for future development, something that's maybe a different thing that's more public facing. And so that's sort of the guide here, is that we're putting this sort of on the western half and leaving that corner up there for something great for the City of Archer in the future. And we've already sized these stormwater ponds to take that into consideration, because it's good to build a stormwater pond once, not multiple times. And again, we're fully complied with the conditional use permit requirements of those performance standards in the city's land development code throughout this whole process of designing this. We put a lot of time and thought into this in consultation with FDOT and the Water Management District throughout this whole process. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is the video. So it's going to start off before we could start on here. You can see the operations inside the control center. So you see how much they're actually monitoring every step of this process. A lot of it's automated. And then you'll see from the drone view of it actually loading into the hoppers and being loaded into the actual truck. Okay? So you go ahead and click it. It should start the video. You see him there. You see he has a viewport of multiple cameras viewing the truck, how it's being loaded. You can see there's sand being loaded in the hopper. And I don't see any dust occurring from that, because this is wetted material. It needs to be wetted material. So it's being loaded in the hoppers. And this is just sand. This is not cement. This is just the sand. All right, so they're filling up the sand hopper more. I don't see any dust occurring from this. They're filling up the other hopper. Not seeing any dust from this whole activity. Continuing it. We're going to pull back here, and then I'll jump to another clip. So this is the washout area. So you see how it's a serpentine back and forth pattern. So when they're washing it out, it starts at the upper end, and as it fills up and goes down, it removes sediment and sediment and sediment out of that washout material until it's safe.
Where does it go?
It goes into the stormwater system after that, or we use it for recycled water. So we kind of went over there pretty quickly, but I have another view here. So it's coming down, and you see those two gray portions on both sides, those are actually holding the cement, okay? And you can see it goes towards the center right above the truck, and as it goes down to the truck, it's completely surrounded to then allow for a vacuum system for any filtering, any dust that might be generated from that process, okay? Right, so would you have any questions about the flume? You're asking where it goes. So if, for example, let's say were to rain in those systems, that washout area were to overflow, it would go to our stormwater system, and it's inert, and it'd go through the whole entire stormwater system. But the whole point of it for our purposes is that's good water that we can then put right back into the cement facility, okay? It costs money to buy water. And so that's very valuable to us. And again, there's aggregate that gets filtered out in that whole process. That's valuable to us. And so every part of this concrete batch plant process has been optimized to try to make it as efficient as possible to keep the impacts as low as possible.
Well, we're talking about water. In the previous meeting, they brought out something about putting water under Archer Road to the other side. What's the deal with that?
So actually, could we go back a slide to the master stormwater slide? It should be, that's perfect, thank you. Yes, so, I sort of have a better slide for this later, but I'll still explain it now. So,
Address it later. Why don't you address that later? as you
okay,
go through?
so I'll address it later, it's very clear
That's fine.
how that's happening.
Well, I would like to have, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead,
but
Mr.
I
Ron.
want to have to.
Don't worry, speaking English.
Ronnie Arnold, the washout areas that you see there. Thank you. Who's directing back there? The washout areas you'll see side by side by side. So they will come up and they'll wash out into the first one, it goes to the next one, it goes to the next one, it goes to the next one. That water does not go to the stormwater. It is recycled. It's recycled, it goes back and it goes on the aggregate. And the aggregate is always kept wet. That's why when you see the stacker putting the material up there, it's wet. They're not gonna have any dust. So I didn't mean to correct you
No,
on that.
you're totally fine. I'm talking about worst case scenario. Yeah.
Then it has, this is actually the area of stormwater, here, 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 here. These, it would go through here, and then, if it overflows, it goes into a sediment pond here, and then from there, it goes to a pond there, okay? Now, the whole time that these have water in them, we're picking them up, and we're gonna recycle this rock. We lose a lot of water by evaporation, okay? So, in order to get to the 20 gallons per yard, somebody might come up and say, hey, it's actually 26 or 29. We have, the aggregate is wet. So that's the good point one of the good points for keeping it wet is to keep down the dust. But then it's wet when it goes in, so it's already wet. So when it goes into the mixer, it's wet, and then the cement goes in with it. Everything is weighed. Everything is weighed. You have the bins up there where the stacker puts it in. Everything is weighed, and then it goes into the mixer directly. And then it has, and then of course we'll get into it, and we'll talk about the dust arrest.
Correct.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
I have one question on the sand and stuff in the concrete bins.
Yes.
I saw in the video at the end, it had, is that kept wet in the bins, or is it only?
Great question. So I can get great clarity on this. So imagine sand, okay? You get delivered from the sand delivery guy. It has some water in it, but you don't know how much. So what you do instead, so that you get a consistent product, is you keep those stockpiles wet all the time. That's what Mr. Ronnie was talking about. So that when you weigh it, you know exactly how much water it has in it, because that kind of sand will have this much water when it's saturated. That's exactly right. And that's how you keep it consistent, because you're making a cake, a concrete cake, but you're making a cake. Exactly right. Everyone's questions good so far? All right, we can go to the next slide. Would you like to watch the video again? No?
No.
All right, we can move on.
It's a good video.
It's a great video.
No sound with that video.
Correct, understood. So what is the planning that goes into a great concrete batch plant? We have to think about the stormwater runoffs from the retention ponds. That's really any site, because with the Swanee River Water Management District, and I'll get into this later, we're talking about giant storm events. We have hurricanes, and they come really close to each other sometimes, and we'll get into that in some details. We have these aggregate bins with the water sprinklers from the recycled water, and they're running 24/7 because they have to keep that aggregate in the right water content so that we can make a good cake every time we make the concrete. We have the washout pits to serve those separate sediment areas and keep the washout of the mixes and the drums. So we have to keep those concrete trucks, when they come back, clean so that they're ready to go for the next day. We can't have standing and dirty concrete drums on the actual trucks. And that runoff water was recycled from the aggregate bins and everything else being washed down into those sediment basins, okay? Including the stacker and the conveyor. So everything is kept wet, everything is, for our purposes, that has the benefit of control of dust control on top of that. And the plant location is located for easy access to the proposed driveway. So we have one driveway coming out that we've now separated completely from the church driveway, and we're not even coming up on 170, we're permitting with FDOT to come right off of Archer Road. And then we have berms and fencing proposed to help with the noise and decibel reduction, because we understand that the community's made that very clear, that they're very concerned about any potential noise from here. And we've gone really above and beyond with the noise study to try to say how much can we knock that down as much as possible. And it's been great. We've got very approvable ratings from the city engineer on that point. And making sure that the material we'll do is just not chain link fence, it's actually a noise abating fence we're putting on top of that berm. We'll get into that a little bit more detailed later. And we want to make sure that all of these things we're providing meet and beat the performance standards you have in your code with those decibel levels for industrial, commercial, and residential properties at our proposed site. So you can go to the next slide. We have to think about the location of buffers. So we've gone through and laid out the widths of the buffers and what the minimum code buffers are required, and we've gone way above and beyond that because of how much the community is concerned about this property and this project. We have to make sure air quality is integral to our equipment and plant design. It's not just us. I have a map right now of all the concrete batch plants just in this local vicinity, and it'll blow your mind how many there are, and you don't even know they're there. Okay, we're not talking about the cement plant in Argo Cement in Newberry. We're talking about concrete batch plants that are all around this county and surrounding counties and cities.
Are they in the middle of the state?
Yes, ma'am. We'll show you all of them. So, and each component is placed on that truck and measured off by the weight. So we have to make sure we have to think about the movement of trucks and vehicles through the site so we have an efficient process to make sure we can have trucks get loaded up efficiently and easily out of the site. And we make sure that cradle and shroud is at the bottom of the chute is there to cover that entire process during the entire mixing of it. And then our dust collector vacuums collect air from that shroud, getting any dust that might have been created from all this wet material, but any dust that might have been created captured inside our filtering system. And then our filtering bags, they have automatic controls on them. You saw the guy in the station with all of those controls and pictures and cameras that he has to make sure nothing is going wrong to those process. And it's not like he just turns something on and off. He has sensors that are reading pressures and fan controls and speeds to make sure everything's operating correctly. And even the dust that is collected, it's so valuable because it's cement. We just bought this cement and we could use it for our concrete. So even if we were creating dust, that's money inside of that dust that gets captured in the filter, and there's actually a whole process to capture that and reuse that and put it right back into our silos by all the equipment. It's all automatically controlled. We have a separate slide for that as well. And we talk about the driveway access. So we're going directly onto Archer Road. Stormwater retention pond is shown on the site. We're talking about runoff from large storm events because we're in the Suwannee River Water Management District. The St. Johns River Water Management District to the east has way lower standards as far as stormwater goes. But because we're Suwannee, and it takes a lot of time for the water to go through all the swamps to make it to the Suwannee River, the storm events are massive from that standpoint. And then we talked about a little bit how FDOT did not provide even their own stormwater concern for Archer Road. The Archer Road is very old, and they never got a FDOT stormwater pond. You've seen other ponds next to the roadways all across Florida, next to FDOT roadways, and it doesn't exist here. So we're having to volunteer that area to FDOT for those stormwater facilities to treat Archer Road. So that's an additional contribution that's being made by Mr. Arnold in this concrete batch plant. And this batch plant provides the funding source for these improvements. And then the access to the Northwest driveway. That is a driveway that's serving the church right now. We're going to keep them and allow them to have that access independently, completely on their own for that church. That was a big concern that was brought up by multiple parties, and we've coordinated with the church on that access. And this is formalized with an agreement between Mr. Arnold and the church for that specific access. So all parties are very happy with that arrangement, along with FDOT. They're very happy for that arrangement as well. So we can go to the next slide. So again, we're hearing so much misinformation. We're hearing about noise decibel levels being off the chart. We're hearing about water consumption's crazy. We're hearing about stormwater runoff is going to flood everybody. We're hearing about intrusion into the ground of chemicals. We're hearing about wildlife impacts, the traffic on 170th. stretching the limits of city services. How will the city ever be able to serve us? Well, none of these things were brought up from all the professionals that reviewed our entire package. You know, we're not coming to you for the first time. We went through a lengthy review process with many professionals looking at all this documentation. And the truth is, we're making improvements to both the city of Archer and FDOT and the Maddox site to keep this whole site from dying in the city of Archer. You know, we're trying to keep it alive with jobs, and if with the success we have here, it can be repeated on the site more in the northeast corner as well. And we're supporting the family church. They have very limited resources. They can't go and move to a different site. You know, they serve the community with their membership. And so that driveway and their parking in that area is very crucial to them. Unfortunately, it was owned by Maddox at the time. And so Mr. Arnold is correcting that by helping them continue with that property and that site to continue to serve and use it for their purposes. And then talking about the stormwater pond, which again, I keep saying I'll do that later, but it's such a huge deal, starting a brand new stormwater pond that's handling water from FDOT, City of Archer, and the Maddox Foundry. Matter of fact, the Maddox Foundry makes up maybe a third of the water that drains into those stormwater ponds. And I'll show that a little bit later. So go ahead, next slide. So now I'm actually going to talk about the stormwater pond associated with it. So you see this large map, okay? In my report, I had it sort of rotated, so I wanted to rotate it back. So the reason why it's rotated to the left there is because north is up now. So that should be correctly north up, where in the report, I'm trying to fit it on a piece of paper, so I twist it a little bit to the side in the paper. But the drainage area extends, and it's hard to make it out on this screen. There's a red and yellow dashed line. So water that comes from City Hall here, all the way to the fire station, all of Arnold Construction's property, all of the Maddox site, that's every bit of water drains to what we call a closed watershed. There's no place for it to go. That's the low spot, okay? And there's been many times where the church is almost completely flooded out. Well, when is there going to be an emergency access along Archer Road where that maybe gets flooded out during a time of need, okay? So currently, Maddox has no storm control. They've been around 100 years. They were grandfathered in all this time. And they could have kept underneath that grandfathering provision and never provided any stormwater control. But because this is a new project, we're having to bring everything up to current standards. And that's a burden that this project is taking on it, to not just do its need, it's going to the city's need and to FDOT's need on this property. And that's why it's so critical, the cost of this infrastructure. This new system accommodates the existing Maddox impervious area. So you know how I said Maddox was grandfathered in? Well, when you design a new system, you can't just say, just let that continue going by itself. No, we're bringing even that existing Maddox buildings, asphalt, everything around those Maddox facilities are being included in this new design. So it's like it's having its first stormwater pond for the first time in its entire life. I already said it's draining a large regional area. I already said it's taking drainage from Archer Road for FDOT. Again, there's a long process with FDOT to have them grant, for us to give them an easement to grant them that stormwater pond for the FDOT's use, with no compensation to us at all from the FDOT. We're doing all this all on our dime, every component of it. And it controls the rate of runoff. So for example, water as it's flowing from uphill to downhill, so that's sort of what this map is showing. City Hall is probably the highest point on this drainage area, at least roughly, and it moves west. Many portions of it moves across the Maddox site, and it goes into that first dark green pond right here, right here. So city runoff is coming to that stormwater pond, okay? And runoff from the concrete batch plant is going into its own stormwater pond. Here, here. And each of those are providing pre-treatment in those facilities. And they're going downhill towards the north. to then it crosses underneath Archer Road. So FDOT, we're putting in a stormwater pond crossing underneath FDOT because there's not one there today. So that means all this water was stuck on the south side of Archer Road and wasn't able to pop off. That's why the church was having so many scares as far as flooding concerns were happening. That whole area, the Maddox Low area of the site, was filling up with water, coming up right to their threshold, and then luckily never got above that certain threshold. But
Are
know
you
how
saying
that's-
all the water from here is going there?
Yes, ma'am.
No, it's going that direction. That's our low point. I live across the street. Goes that way. Don't go that way.
Understood. And so the water cascades from one stormwater pond to the next stormwater pond underneath Archer Road to then those FDOT stormwater facilities in the front of the Arnold Construction property. So go ahead to the next slide. So this is the dust collection. So I showed two different forms here. So the one on the right is sort of the classic version with the really tall silos, okay? And the one on the left is the modern version where the silos are at an angle, which was shown in the video, okay? But both of them work the exact same way. They're just structured, they look slightly different associated with it. So they both have the ductwork coming from the shroud. So right as they're dumping the material into the truck, there's a shroud around there with tubing coming off of it that has fans, pulling all of that, having negative pressure vacuum on it to suck anything dust that might be generated into these dust collection tanks. They have a filter that's designed to contain 99.9% of dust at the 1 micron particle level. Very small. And they have a PLC-based control system, that just means computer-controlled system, that's monitoring the pressure buildup in the pipes and how good that filter's running. So don't you wish you maybe had this in your air conditioning system where it said time to change the filter? But they do have that. So when the airflow starts to reduce going through that filter, they then have a jet pulse that goes in the opposite direction. So it closes off, jet pulses the opposite direction to shake all that dust loose. And what is that dust? That is valuable cement. That's cement that we paid a lot of money for, okay? And so it then gets automatically recycled with a screw pump to take it back and right back into those storage silos to use in the next go-around.
So it takes out the articulate particles, is what you're telling me?
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. I was, to be honest, a little bit naive to the actual inner workings of it. And then I've gone through with the actual designers, a couple different vendors, talking about the actual step-by-step how it contains dust. So we can go on to the next slide. So these are the performance standards, Section 17, performance standards. So it has a long component there about emissions and fumes. And we took the time with all the vendors' information, because again, they don't just design these one-off. There's a whole list of Florida statutes they're required to comply with, national statutes for air quality. You know, we had the National Air Quality Act for a reason, okay? A lot of these things, I think people had ideas about dustiness, just come from old style facilities from before a lot of these codes and things were enacted, and these problems have been solved. Okay, you're not the only community that's concerned about dust. Everyone's concerned about dust, and these new equipment meets all of those standards, and they're required to meet those standards, and they're required to continue meeting those standards. So again, we provided all the documentation of what standards this equipment has been designed to meet. Next slide, please. Now we're getting ready to talk about the berms, okay? So as shown in our noise study, so we presented a full noise study showing how even if we did those vertical tall silos, which we're not doing anymore, we were weighing different types of material, equipment, and we went to the ones that were the angled silos. So even with the tall equipment, we're providing an 8-foot berm with a 6-foot tall acoustic fence on top of that, all right? So we're talking about a good 14-foot tall barrier around all of those areas that you saw in light green, around those entire areas, okay, to minimize any concern of noise around all those properties. And on top of that, at the southern property line, we moved the buildings further back. But you can see a cross-section here. In our report, we showed how the sound decibels would be different based on equipment that's near the ground, equipment that might be mounted high in one of the silos. And we provided all of this to the Kimley Horn engineer, their sound engineer, who reviewed all of it and gave their findings and
What-
approval on the.
What is an acoustic fence and how does it work?
Yeah, it's just not like a board fence. There's vendors who sell it with a certain sound deadening rating, and so they just call it an acoustic fence. I don't think I did my specific research on how specifically it does that, but it has a whole bunch of specifications that it meets to be called an acoustic fence.
It's a special woven fabric that has grommets in it, and they actually tie it to the fence, because I did.
And that may be, I'm just not an expert on the specific types of things from that
Let me
standpoint.
just say one thing.
Yes, Mr. Arnold, come on up.
That material, the material that he's talking about,
Say your name again.
Ronnie Arnold, the applicant, the material that he's talking about does hang, it's got loops and ties, it does hang on a chain link fence. So there will be a chain link fence up there, and then the material just rolls out and put on it. And we couldn't find anything better suited to reduce the decimals than that material. And it's not gonna be cheap.
While you're at the podium, Mr. Arnold, I want to ask a question about one of the previous slides. It said that your business is run by your wife and your 3 sons. Are you currently working or are you retired?
No, I'm working.
Okay, I just saw in one of the previous things, it said that the company was run by your wife and 3 sons. It didn't mention you.
My wife will not be involved in the concrete batch plant. We bring in people that have run plants before, they'll come in and run.
Okay, just,
That have been certified.
okay.
They've been certified for stormwater.
I was just clarifying one of the slides that was presented earlier that said R.E. Arnold Construction was run by your wife and your 3 sons.
Right.
I was just asking if you were actively working or if you were retired, that's all.
Okay. Can I
Thank
go
you.
ahead? Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll be answering more questions, but I've got to go ahead and say this. I do not know Mrs. Green. I do not know her, okay? I do not know her son. I have never done business with their son, okay? So I don't know, I will have to, what's the word? I'm not happy with that, all right? And I will appeal that the good lady there isn't sitting in that chair.
I think the problem and the reason that was arose is because she should have been more biased sitting up here instead of actually being an advocate for your side while she was sitting on the
Okay, then
dais.
this lady here needs to resign. She needs to bow
If
out.
I may, Mr. Chair,
Would you like to give me a reason?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We were standing,
gonna intercede.
right out front.
One at a time.
I'm going to intercede.
Go, Mr. Arnold.
We were standing right out front of this building. There was 3 of us, and you came up to us and you made a nasty slur and used the word shit.
Oh, well, I know that
Front here.
word.
Okay, let's just stop this
You
right
did.
now.
What's that got to do with anything? I know
Okay.
a whole bunch of those kind of words.
You don't think that's showing bias?
Biased? I think we all do it, honey. I don't know what you're talking
Okay,
about.
then if we
If I
all
may,
do it,
Mr. Chair.
Madam Attorney, if we all do it, then why is Miss Green not sitting in that chair?
For clarification, Ms. Green, my opinion, based on, regarding Ms. Green's eligibility to vote on this item, was not based on any comments that she made or didn't make, but was wholly and solely tied to her potential special pecuniary interest in the outcome of this item based upon the rules and ethical requirements outlined for this board. That is all.
Okay, the correspondence between her and I, that, and what she said, that
Okay,
doesn't have anything to do with anything.
we're getting way off the
No,
subject here.
we're not getting off because this lady here isn't sitting there. I'll let it go, but I'm just, I don't know what the legal term is, I object to that, okay?
All right, thank
But
you.
anyway, I'll calm down, but
Thank
there is bias here. I'll say another thing. Clear cut. Can you go to 10? Opie, put it on 10.
Yeah, the person in the back room is doing it.
Oh, can we get to 10?
Yes, if you could change it to slide 10. You see there's numbers on the slides. Yes, thank you, ma'am.
There. Okay, here we go. We have those pointers at the shop, you know, they go over, but we don't have it here. Okay. This doesn't show this very well, but it's a Google map. But if we did have one that's better, that's over a Google map, we have not touched any trees or anything in here. All we've ever done is come in here and clean up all the metal. We probably could show you a Google map. All the metal that's in here and that's stacked up, we haven't touched any of the buildings, we haven't touched any of the trees, we haven't touched any of this. I listened to the good people that come up, and a lot of them had very good points at the last meeting, and I haven't got a chance to respond. But we since those good people talking and me listening, we've moved the machine, we've set it up, and we've got the noise problem taken care of. We've recycled the water. We changed it to a super duper mobile batch plant that is lower. It's actually, we have based the sound on a taller one that had the great big high silo. Well, now it's low, and the silos are on each side like saddles, and that will help keep it quiet. But we've done a lot. A lady come up and said, well, we don't want to see trucks going up and down Magnolia. And that makes good sense, okay? So when we do this pond, we got with DOT, so we're gonna come in here on a separate entrance and in or out here on Archer Road, and it's gonna be safe. Because this road here, I think the church is gonna have to adapt it because it's on such an angle that it's hard to turn a right turn. And that's something the church and Robbie with DOT are already talking about. But we're contributing to Archer, and no one contributes to Archer. Nobody else. I was the first one in 30 years to come in and put retention ponds out here for our crop. But when this church flooded, there wasn't anybody over there but RERL Construction. RERL Construction puts their pumps over there and pumped all this water out of there so it wouldn't go into their building. And I don't want to have to go out there and continue to pump water when we're right there with the Swanee Stormwater, and they are waiting for us to get the approval from you folks to go ahead and give us the permit for this whole thing. And I have to give them an easement to go in here, and we're gonna have to put pipe on the highway, we're gonna have to repave it. I'm spending millions of dollars here, okay? But it's for the good of Archer. And we're not trying, I don't want dirty air, dirty water. So we're meeting all the specifications to keep a good product, a good business there that's gonna put out a product that literally is going to, the batch plant just weighs and put it in a mixer, the mixer goes and he's long. That mixer's rolling all the time while he's driving down Highway.
Correct.
And that's the end of it. Thank you.
So we can go to, I forget where we were, maybe slide 12? Yep, 18, yes, thank you. So we're meeting all these criteria. You can go to the next slide, number 19. We talked about the noise berms and how we are not even doing that high elevation, so you can go to the next slide, thank you. And I'm just giving more zoomed in on this berm so we can sort of show, the light green along the southern property line and how we increased this distance along the southern property line as well. I think we're providing 100 feet there now, where before we were at the buffer per the code, so we've increased that tremendously. Go on to the next slide. I turned off all the colorization so that you could see what's there today, and these are giant piles and all this old scrap metal equipment that Mr. Arnold was talking about in this location.
And I don't see a scale on any of these. How far did you say that was? That
Oh,
plant
that
would be
buffer?
located?
100 feet away.
So,
It's
so
shown in the, well, not in this one, actually. I have a better.
I would say, because the stuff that I've seen so far hasn't actually, it's shown very detailed where everything's going, but it hasn't showed a scale to show how far it is going to be from property lines.
Let's try the next slide then. Maybe that'll have your question. The one after this one? Yes. So this one calls out, this was in the noise study. 107-foot separation, and that's just from the berm to the concrete. And then when you do the berm, I believe that's another, it's right there, 34 feet. So we'll probably have 135 feet total from the southern property line to the bottom of any of the equipment along the southern side. And again, what Mr. Arnold was talking about, that's all sediment ponds, so there won't be any equipment there. 135 feet from edge of concrete to that property line with a giant berm in that location there. That's what we're proposing along the southern property line. Yeah, 8-foot tall berm with the fence on top, with the acoustic fence on top, additional 100-foot separation from the southern property line, future buildings. Yes, so we could actually increase the sound deadening, that in that 100 feet, we may have storage or warehouse buildings at some point in the future that we could install there that would even further enhance the sound deadening along that southern property line. And again, we meet all the performance criteria of the decibel criteria of the City of Archer Land Development Code, as, again, approved by the city engineer. I sound like a little bit of a broken record talking about how we've been approved by all of your professionals that have looked at this material. So continue to the next slide.
Well, before you do that.
Yes, sir.
Before you do that, I think you need to explain it.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
All right, Ronnie Arnold, developer. What I'd like to point out, he's telling you there's 100 from here to, first of all, let me identify the areas. This is a commercial area. All of this is industrial, all of that's commercial. And we own this lot, all these lots here. Some of this is zoned industrial.
Good point.
This is zoned, this right here is, saying that, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, good point.
Folks in the audience, we own this property here as well. Some of it is industrial, we're not going to be using it.
Correct.
Because we're putting a barn across it.
Yeah.
This is residential. If we can ever get, there's already lots. If at some point we do get sanitation, we're going to put houses on that for help. But what I want to point out too, he's saying about 165 feet from here to here. That's because it's what we have to what's required for the decimal level for here is like
It's less.
it's like
Yes.
it's like a 70, but we're getting like a 59. I don't see that on there. Just point it out. But so this is commercial. What we have to meet on the decimal level here is not as great as back here. Okay, because this is residential. So we've got to a big distance here from here to the inside of the berm.
Yeah.
Is 402 feet.
From the actual equipment to the actual area.
That's quite a distance, 402 feet. And then you can read the decimal point when you get over here to what we have to do is just get down to a 61. I believe over in here, the decimal point has to be a 45. But when you come over here and measure us where my property is here, you're down to a 45. So we're beating what the city requires. And I think there's a chart on here that shows what the city requires the decimals.
It may be in some of the language in it.
Okay, and over here it's all industrial, so we have no problem. So we're meeting it on both places, and we worked with Felicity, with the city's engineer.
Yep.
To get it to this point. And it requires moving the machine, the equipment down here, and that was fine. And actually, to be honest with you, we can pick up the machine and move it within 6 hours anywhere we have to, if it wouldn't work. But we know it's gonna work, because in all actuality, this fence, this coating that's gonna go on the chain link fence ends up being an overkill and hasn't been used. This hasn't been used in the calculation, because it's a minus 27.
Right, it's extra stuff, right, it's extra. No, I think the good point that I missed completely was that our property line isn't actually here. We actually even own property even further. So while we do provide 135 feet of just pure empty space, there's even more buffer because of those properties that we own further south to that. So go ahead to the next slide. So these were the conclusions from the noise study from Kimley Horn of their review and having no exceptions of the noise on the site. And they request additional testing when the facility's in further operation, so that we can then further, once it's operating, additionally confirm that the facility meets the decibel levels. So that we could add other kind of noise deadening things if we need to in the future. So we already think it's going to perform that way, and we'll confirm it after construction that it is actually meeting those standards afterwards. Okay, so next slide. One of the other items was concern about fire and explosion hazards. Well, we don't have any explosion hazards at all with concrete. It doesn't have any of that concern. And for fire, we have a fire hydrant within close proximity of the site, and that was actually reviewed by Alachua County Fire Rescue for that component of the review. Next slide. So now we're talking about other facilities that exist in this whole area that you drive by very often. And these are just ones on this Google map. You can see there's some out in Bell, there's Money in Gainesville, one near High Springs. Of course, there's one in Newberry. But I'm not talking about the cement plant. I'm talking about concrete batch plant also in Newberry. Okay, if we go to the next slide, here is one in High Springs. So this is the first one I sort of remember, because when I'm driving up to High Springs for my city commission meetings, I see this silo coming out from behind the trees and past the fence, and it's oh wow, that's a concrete batch plant now. And you can see, look at that footprint. Very small, has stuff all around it. There's trees all around it. It's a very small facility. If we go to the next slide, this is one in Bell, and you can see it's completely open to view. It's another small facility. They're just mixing, and this is the other one of the old style silos there. You can see the street view for this is the one in Bell. Go on to the next slide. This is in Ocala. You can see it's a very small footprint. You can see the tanks or the separation channels for the washout areas at the top end there. You can see the bins filled with sand, etc. You can see the shadow of their silo. It's actually kind of hard to see the silo in this picture. It's such a light color. Go on to the next. Oh, actually, in the bottom right corner, you can sort of see the silo there has like a yellow color to it with the cars in the bottom right corner of this. Go on to the next slide. This is one in Jacksonville. This is one very near residential uses. And again, it's surrounded with trees, etc., around that whole facility, but it's adjacent to roads and right at the entrance for residential area. Go into the next slide. So this is the one in the city of Newberry, and I have some drone aerials. However, I don't know how much you're aware of the giant the giant residential coming in around Easton Sports Complex, okay? So you have a developer who sees this industrial, and they've designed their residential right up smack dab against it, okay? So there's already phase one being constructed, and all their future phases are coming right up to that. So you see the sort of highlighted square here and here. That's where the concrete batch plant is. And to the north of that is zone mixed use, because they're going to have a mixture of different residential types, from single family to apartments, etc. If you go to the next slide, you can see the aerial of this. So at the bottom right corner is the batch plant, and to the north is the residential homes in phase one. Batch plant. And there's no buffering at all for that. It's completely open. That developer had no issue with developing that. And then if we actually look to the west, so in the next slide, please. Looking to the west, you see the batch plant. And more residential areas. So this batch plant is existing in residential areas all across the cities that they're in. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is one in North Gainesville. And you can see very small footprint. They have the settlement ponds, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can see in the top right corner, as you're driving on the road, there's the silo right there. There's no even an attempt at doing any sort of sound deadening. So that's where Mr. Arnold is really listened to the complaints of the community, and even though they didn't have to, did a whole bunch of work on trying to get that sound as low as possible. Okay, so next slide. So I have a sequence of aerials just showing the history of the Maddox site. So the oldest one I could find quickly, apparently there's places where I could go at UF down in the archives where they have some stuff from the 30s, and I didn't go to that level. But you can see in 64, the area to the north was cleared. You had the Maddox site. It's basically the exact same footprint it is today. They had, give me a second here. So they hadn't done it yet. But they were basically using their entire yard for all of their spent casting sand. So when they were casting these large fittings, they were taking this clay sand, packing it into them, cooking it, pouring in the molten metal to make these giant facilities, and then they would take the sand and they would just spread it out on the property and make mounds with it. So if you go to the next slide, so now we're up to 1982, and you can see the building for the church show up there, and then you can see where Maddox built. It may seem like a stormwater pond, but I think they were using it maybe sort of like sediment control coming from the site, because it was too high up on the land and didn't really protect anything. So I'm not sure what area physically did. I can't find any permitting history where they permitted any of that. They just sort of did it, right?
Back then, they wouldn't have needed permits, and yes, they did have ponds, they did have runoff sites.
I understand. And so if you go to the next slide, they built another pond on the site in 2004, which definitely would have required a permit, because permits started being required in the late 80s. And again, they were just building up berms and piles of this material on the site and sort of disposing it on site in multiple locations. And that's where we're here today. We'll go ahead to the next slide. Again, 2011, 2014. They built another stormwater pond without a permit. So now they had 3 ponds, and I don't want to call them stormwater ponds because they don't meet any criteria, and they were never permitted with anybody, and they're not laid out in a way that actually captures water. So I think they were doing some sort of sediment erosion control, runoff control, if you will. But again, none of it's ever permitted. I checked both with the Water Management District and FDEP at the time. Go on to the next slide. Again, 2017, 2020, and then that's sort of where we are today. These are remaining for reference in case we have a question about something that may come up. If we go to the next slide. So we're talking about the Maddox Foundry history. It was established in 1905 by Mr. Maddox, serving the local phosphate mining industry. Because sometimes it's hard to understand that this is actually a mining area. From all those pits north of Newberry, a lot of mining equipment is used, large equipment for that. And that's what was sort of the bread and butter of the Maddox facility. Now a lot of that is to other manufacturers in the area and internationally for that kind of equipment. Go ahead, click one thing and it'll go to another portion. They're creating jobs and livelihood for this small town at the time. And it's sort of a business model that doesn't work anymore for that type of manufacturing at this local of a level. So how are we going to change this site to make it local? Well, that's one thing that hasn't gone away. Local site construction companies are thriving. They're doing really well, and they're made up of your actual neighbors and your community associated with it. So go ahead to the next slide. You have a lot of good comparison cities around here. City of Newberry, City of Archer, and City of Williston. Okay? So the next slide after that, we wanted to compare some stats between the 3 of them. All right? Go ahead and click the slide again. We're the City of Archer. So we're comparing 2021 to 2022 with the census data that we have from that. Okay? And you can see the population. Newberry and Williston, they went up 1.2%, something like that, showing consistent growth, while the City of Archer has dropped by 14%. Okay? Poverty rate. It went down in Newberry and Williston, but in the City of Archer, the poverty rate has gone up. The median income has gone up in those other cities and only gone down in the City of Archer.
We have no sewer.
And I can understand that, and that's why some of this taxable income you get from this would help with some of that sewer facility. And so if you look at the median property value, all of it's gone up, but the City of Archer has had the lowest growth of all that property value. And let's look at employment. Employment in all those other cities have gone up very healthily single digits, while the city of Archer has matched with the population and everything else by going down by almost 20%. We're trying to help here. We're trying to bring more local work and jobs to this property. So go ahead on the next slide. So what approvals do we already have? So we've gone through with the zoning administrator, with the North Central Florida Planning Council. They reviewed all this material that we submitted. You have a very long checklist that we submitted multiple documents for, and plans and reports. Kimley Horn has had no exceptions with the information we provided. North Central Florida Planning Council, again, allowed to come here with their approval. And we've already started permitting with Swanee River and FDOT drainage and driveway, but we can't move forward with them until we have the city's approval, because you are the ultimate authority on the success of this project. And so that's what we're sitting here at this time, asking you all to make a decision based on the actual performance standards of this project. Go ahead to the next slide. So the burden of proof. I wanted to make sure, and I want to get the confirmation of the city attorney, that your job as this board is to not make a decision whether you like this or not. Your job is to look at the evidence, look at the performance standards, and have we met that? Okay? And with that, let's see. I don't think there's one slide after this. Is there? No, not. So can we go back to maybe slide 12 or 10, I believe, that had just the layout of the site in case we have any questions that come up? I'm sorry.
10.
Yeah, it was 10. Perfect, perfect. So in case we have any questions that may come up. So with that, Mr. Chair, I am available for any questions, unless Mr. Arnold would like to add something.
Did you point out that it's all concrete, that all the workspace is concrete?
Mr. Earl, if you guys speak, please come to the mic, because they can't, the recording can't hear.
Correct.
Thank you.
I asked him, and I might have missed it, that all of the work area is concrete. So if you look at a lot of the plant, I put a Tic Tac in my mouth. A lot of the plants that you looked at, plants all over, they didn't put all of this concrete base in brand new like we're going to do. And we'll have a F curve that goes all the way around it as well. So we are capturing every bit of the water that is within that work area, and it's going to go, it's going to become, if it's clean, like on the very far, the north side of the plant will be a clean surface. So it'll be like this. The water on the north side, that water can go into the water retention pond. Any water at the plant or this way is going to be directed to the washout areas, and then it goes to the set of the ponds. And then the last pond should be very clean water, but we will be pumping from that as well. So we're always going to be recycling water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to further clarify, I don't know if you saw the other examples of those other plants. They would take, which I think it's kind of funny. They're a concrete plant, right? But they used asphalt millings as the ground cover for their plant and all the installations. So what Mr. Arnold's talking about, this will actually be paved, which will help with water infiltration that might go into the ground on top of that.
And
Thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Okay, one more thing. There'll be a broom there all the time. At the end of each day, it'll be swept up, and they'll sweep it to an area that we can push it over into. Like right at the plant, there's going to be a pit there too. So we're going to be sweeping up all the time. And this is the same as we do on any FDOT road job. We're certified for erosion control. We're putting that exact plan into how we maintain this plant and the site. Thank you.
So now, Mr. Chair, I'm available for any questions you may have, or on Mr. Arnold, et cetera.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Clarification on the berm. The berm goes around and the fence is on top, but up on that top, the long retention pond?
Yes.
Where the driveway, is there a berm on the left side of that, or is that just buffer land?
So I'm putting the map. You talking about
Up.
this?
Over and up. That pond, that big green pond?
Oh, this one.
Yeah. To the left there, is that a berm?
Oh.
No. Go straight up. Straight up. Is that a berm? Or is that just a buffer property?
Light green.
Oh, you talking about this property?
No, no, no.
You talking about here?
That green, light green?
I see. So part of our coloring is, and actually our permitting with the Water Management District, when we build a pond, yes, you do have to berm up one side, but on the uphill side, you're actually cutting down and the pond's flat. So yes, that light green area you see, I wish I had, there's 3 colors of green, right? Very light green. The berm is sort of a medium light green, and the stormwater pond is a dark green. So on the left side of that pond is very light green, but that is a slope going up to the stormwater pond to make a berm there, but that's a berm for holding water. Correct. Now, it will work as that, you know, because all berms do, but that's not a concern.
The driveway's going out to Archer Road that way, it was just,
Right. But that's just normal road traffic at that point.
right.
Right. You know, Archer Road makes a lot of noise on its own. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question that has not been addressed.
Yes, ma'am.
It's on, I know you don't have this page, but it's a memorandum, it's page 5, and it says historic resources. Anybody who knows me knows where I live, and I'm very concerned with historic structures. It says, according to the Florida Division of Historical Resources Master Site Plan dated 2024, there are no known historic resources on site. Yes, there is.
I'm sorry, ma'am. It does not meet the state statute requirements of historic structures on the site. We did not generate that report.
It is on here. It's been there for over 30 years. I have the numbers for it. It's on the Florida State Historic Site Plan. Not that piece of property, but the Maddox Foundry is.
Oh, that may be so.
Yes.
We're not proposing any destruction of that facility.
Okay, well, it would be nice if you'd keep it up.
And if we ever did decide to take it down, we would come for a separate application and go through this whole process for that section.
I bet you would.
All right, my turn.
Excuse me, may I ask you a question?
Absolutely, go ahead, Mr. Arnold.
I want to make sure I understood. You are for leaving the buildings up?
I am for having them taken care of in the yard mode and things so it looks like it at least is cared for. It's
Have you looked at the
derelict.
site and how it's cut? The clear
After
area?
2 years, yeah, I see.
We've been, Mr. City Manager, you contacted me one time about cutting it. Hasn't it been cut ever since?
Well, we've actually talked a couple of times, but they are taking care of it.
A couple times, maybe, okay. But many times it's been cut over the past year. Is that what you mean? You're not for leaving those buildings up?
No, I'm talking about putting the bricks back up. I'm talking about like fixing windows. You're just letting it go to hell. Oh, that's right. That's a 4-letter word. Excuse me.
Well, when I bought that, the windows were broke out and the roof was crushed in.
So that means you don't have to fix it?
Well, we're
Never mind.
working on it.
Okay. Again, going back to references that you've made a couple times throughout your presentation, because you're saying that y'all have met all the requirements, you don't have to be here. You've said it a few times, because y'all have already met the requirements. You do have to be here. That's why you're here. I just want you to,
Would you
because
like me to clarify?
well, no, well, I mean, I would like you to clarify why you've said a couple of times that y'all don't have to be here because you've met your
That was
requirements.
not my intent. My intent was, we are an allowed use.
Yeah,
So this is not a hearing about whether or not this is an allowed use on this property. And instead, it's a hearing on whether or not we've met the performance standards.
correct. I just wanted to just reiterate, but a couple of times you said that y'all don't have to be here, but you do. You know, because, I mean,
I'm sorry, that was not my
yeah,
intent.
okay. And then, you also said that y'all have had extensive soil tests done. Where are the soil tests and the results?
We
Because,
submitted them in our applications.
okay, I mean, can somebody tell me where they're at in this 290 pages.
Yes, they are in there. They're very detailed. I noticed that we have a lot of clayey sand. That's
Yes.
what I got out.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just saying, because there was a heavy industrial use that never had any type of regulatory action against it
Oh,
in
yes,
100
it
years.
has.
Well, I mean, I'm just
Yes,
saying,
it
there's
has.
been nothing,
They did, I don't know how many, either 17 or 27 test wells. They did a lot of extensive, all kinds of different reports. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work went into Maddox to prove it was a safe site.
okay, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
Yeah, and that hasn't
over
come up
100
in any
years,
of our-
there's been nothing. Okay, so the ground and everything is safe on that site.
Correct.
As of today. So, okay. And then, also, because we know that water's going to be used and recycled, because water is a very valuable thing, I just want to make sure that RE Arnold Construction and the concrete batch plant, if approved, would be 100% reliant on city water and not the pre-existing wells that are on that property.
Yeah, and
Whenever
I'll
we
have-
met before, Mr. Arnold himself said that he had no problem tapping off and disabling those wells.
And I'll have them make that statement again.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know about capping off any wells. I don't, I have to look into that. I can't tonight say I'm gonna cap off the wells. I can tell you I'm not gonna use it in that concrete batch plant. There's wells there for monitoring wells. The state comes in and they monitor the water table there right up front. But the well is not in use. But I was told, like, the city water loops around inside of Maddox, and there's water lines all over the place. So that's something we'll have to look into. We got a water line that comes, it's on the ground, it comes all the way across to the church. That's something that we'll have to get with the city, because that we can't, every time that this broke, we can't go fix that, setting up on top of the ground. But no, I stand behind, we will use the city water. That's understood, because the city can use the revenue.
Oh, exactly. And based on past experience, the foundry's water bill was never that much, except for whenever the well was broken. But by city charter, every business and every citizen within the city limits of Archer must be 100% on city utility.
Right, and we went over that, and
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that that well will not be used in the production of cement.
Yep, exactly correct.
Or in the concrete batch. Yeah, it will not be used in the production of concrete.
When we do, we are gonna go, we have a lot of plans for this site.
Yeah.
But let me just say, the way this property is right now, I pay $22,000 a year for taxes. And look at it, but we all know the city needs tax revenue.
You know, everybody that pays their taxes in this room knows about paying taxes in
And I don't know
Alachua
what I
County.
pay in taxes across the street, but I'm sure it's quite a bit. But I do know tangible tax, property tax, $300,000-$400,000 is what we pay.
So to further clarify, there's a city ordinance. That's very clear.
All right, Mr. Chair, if we don't have any more questions from the board, it'll be time for public comment. Just a reminder, public comment is 3 minutes. Would the chair like me to time, or is the chair going to time?
All right, let's, only those that have been, sorry?
She asked you a direct question.
Oh, what?
Are you gonna time, or do you want me to time?
Oh, you can.
I will time.
Before I was.
All right, it'll be 3 minutes per speaker. Once you sit down, that's your one turn, and we ask that everyone try to stay on the topic of this issue. Other issues can be addressed later at general public comment if they do not relate to the concrete batch plant.
Can the people that come up be given a 20-second notice to maybe bring it to a close? in case they were planning on running longer, just to give them an idea that their 3 minutes is almost up.
I will raise my hand to get your attention at 20 seconds left.
Okay, please, honor system, only those that have been sworn in, come up, one at a time. Come to the microphone, state your name. We'll start from the front of the room, work back. Raise your hand and I'll point to someone and you'll come up and speak.
My name is David Norton. I live maybe 400 yards from this site. I'm concerned that the heavy industrial use of the former Maddox Foundry has nothing to do with this level of activity at the site. One thing I haven't heard anybody, Mr. Arnold, or anybody else, and I have some questions. How many more heavy trucks can we expect using that site? How many a day? How many cement trucks? How many semis carrying the aggregate, carrying the cement? How much more activity are we going to be expecting going through this intersection and this two-lane highway that's already, I've made some rough counts. I wouldn't swear to this even though I'm under oath, but there's many times a day I've seen probably 3 out of 20 vehicles going up and down this highway are already over 10-ton vehicles. So this has been my neighborhood for 40 years. I've raised my kids here. I don't think that this heavy activity is the best thing for the city of Archer or anybody who lives near this plant. I wonder if anybody who's going to vote on this issue has ever stood within a few hundred yards of one of these plants in full operation and experienced it and thought that they would like to have one, maybe that close to their house. So that's my concern. My question I would like to have answered, if I could get, as far as how many trucks per day?
Just to keep it the same, if you could write down the questions, and then when you get a chance for your rebuttal, we'll have them all answered at once. That way we're not up and down and up and down.
Agreed.
I paused your time, so feel free.
The activity, when I moved here in 1983, the activity at Maddox Foundry, there was probably at least 35 employees there, maybe more, I'm estimating. For that amount of employment, there was nowhere near this much activity. Maybe a railroad car running up there with some big pipes on it. So all I'm saying, I don't know if Mr. Arnold bought this property with this intention, or if the city of Archer, and if the city of Archer was aware of that intention. I don't know if the city of Archer ever had the opportunity to say, no, this is not something we want right in the center of a town, right next to City Hall. This is not, all of the plants that they've shown, I'm aware of a few of them. They're not something that's going on right there. Okay, I'm finished. That's my major concerns.
Thank you. Next up. Someone raise your hand if you want to speak. Oh, yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Gene Arnold. I want to talk to you all about the city of Newberry. It's booming right now. He's going to show you, take it on around there, the Avalon Woods subdivision.
I have an objection.
You saw,
What? What's the objection? The objection is that you are part of Arnold.
This is enough.
You guys dominated the whole
Therefore,
meeting.
you are a
Why can't I speak?
developer had that.
Mr. Chair.
Let the attorney make a decision, please.
It's public comment.
Sit down, Mr. Lewandowski.
Mr. Lewandowski,
Everyone sit down. Let the attorney make the decision.
Thank you. As a member of the public, everyone who is a member of the public may speak regardless of their relationship to the applicant. Thank you.
Would you start my time over, please?
I will.
Have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, my name is Gene Arnold. I'd like to talk about the city of Newberry. It is booming right now. This photo is going to show you the Avalon Woods subdivision. It is right next to the SRM concrete batch plant. Take a good look at it. It's 300 yards away. That is the last homes that they just built. There are 2 roads. They are building more homes, brand new homes. Those homes in the month of June, they built and closed on 13 homes. The average cost of those homes is $350,000. A bunch of people are paying a bunch of money to build right next to a concrete batch plant, a dangerous concrete batch plant, some will tell you. Now I want you to pay attention over here. Show them that over there. Take a look. That is the Argos cement plant. It looks like a major factory with skyscrapers. It's right there in that vicinity. That is not what we're doing. I'm going to give you an idea of the difference. A cement plant, a cement production plant, is $300 million. A concrete batch plant is around $3 million. We are not building a $300 million cement plant in the city of Archer. And the last thing I'll say, and I don't know the legal, but Mrs. Attorney, you took a big step there. I don't know what grounds, but tell me again, it was somebody's relative that owns a concrete or a company, a general company. What's the name of the company? It's some company is being enriched because we're building a concrete batch plant. How in the world would they be enriched by this? I don't know. Question for removing somebody, but it seems political to me. Thank you.
Okay, with your hand up, come on.
My name is Sarah Brannon, and I grew up here. And I know that Archer needs some growth, and I know that Archer needs some jobs, but not any kind. Some of us have breathing problems, and there's quite a few people in my family have them. I'm supposed to be on oxygen right now. That's why I was leaving, because I've been off it too long. But we don't want any kind of growth. We don't want any kind of jobs. We want healthy jobs. And from what I was told, the air, the dust from that stuff that you'll be doing would hurt us, that we couldn't even come out the door. We done bought property here, and you think we want to stay inside like we're a prisoner all the time in the house? No, I don't think so. And I think before y'all vote, y'all please take in consideration of the citizens that live here. And it's not just me have breathing problems. There's a lot of children have breathing problems. Please take us into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And for everybody else that come up, can you please address us, not address the crowd, please?
You see a hand somewhere? All right. Oh.
Hello, my name is Chandler Ash. I've lived in the area for 20 years. I'm going to get right to the point since I only have 3 minutes. I have a couple different excerpts from articles and one study that I wanted to read for you. As you might know, concrete batch plants are a very big problem in the city of Houston. So I have some examples from that city. The first one is from a nonprofit called One Breath Partnership. They write about residents in Houston House District 140, where they tell their representative that they cannot leave their house. Dust from concrete batch plants covers their roofs, their cars, their barbecue pits, and they can't have friends over. The dust, they tell him, is everywhere. They also write that dust is a kind of air pollution called particulate matter that can penetrate deep into the lungs, and it's just one part of the problem that concrete batch plants represent. The thing is that there are not necessarily air monitors in the area, and without those air monitors, people might not know what exactly they're breathing in. It's dusty. They might not know that they're breathing in one of the deadliest kinds of pollution. And in fact, particulate matter was the result in 2015 of 5,200 premature deaths in the city of Houston alone. Now, Houston, obviously a lot bigger than Archer, but it's still a very big problem there. Another article from the Environmental Defense Fund, they write about this specific area in Houston called the Fifth Ward. They did a study showing that the nitrogen oxide levels were 48% higher in that area than the rest of the city. Residents are largely people of color, more than 90% non-white, and 40% live below the federal poverty line. They face higher rates of asthma, COPD, coronary heart disease, and stroke. And life expectancy is almost a decade lower than the rest of the region at 69 compared to 78 years old. The last thing I wanted to read to you is from a study titled Polluting Under the Radar, Emissions, Inequality, and Concrete Batch Plants in Houston. The authors write, moreover, our study analysis reveals that concrete batch plants are more likely to be located in the census tracts with lower median household incomes and higher percentages of Hispanic and Black residents. Though our analysis is not able to identify the causal impact of zoning on concrete batch plant siting, it offers suggestive evidence that the lack of zoning could be a contributing factor to the disproportionate siting near minority communities. They also write that the current network of regulatory grade particulate matter monitors in the United States is scattered and intermittent and unable to capture the neighborhood level effects on small sources. So when I hear you talk about this concrete batch plant, I see the same pattern that researchers in the city of Houston saw, where poor, mostly minority communities are taken advantage of, and hazardous materials are made in their backyards with no regard for their health,
That's
safety.
time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Back here. Yeah.
I thought there was people in front of me that wanted to
That's all right. You know what? You raise your hand.
Okay. Lori Costello, citizen. Let me put my glasses on. I've been a real estate broker for 25 years, and it will affect property value. Okay. I own my own real estate company, so like I said, I'm a professional. The worst thing about it, it's going to be harder for you to sell your house with what they're proposing to put here, the concrete batch plant. All right. Also, if the chair could review the criteria for the CUP and how they comply with each item, because I believe the one is property value, might be lighting, safety, fit in with existing zoning, and more. Am I on the right page for the CUP? Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Because I would like to know his answers on the CUP. That would be great, because I don't see how he complies. I really don't. I really think this is developer versus truth. I've seen a lot of people come up to this dais with building plans, and what they say here and what really happens is two different things. I've been coming to these for 35 years. So, and he did say, or he will recycle the water, or, I don't know whether y'all heard that, but I heard that loud and clear, or it will go back into the retention ponds. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Rhonda Robertson, citizen. What I'm about to relate to you are my personal first-hand experiences. We can all Google the words cement and concrete and read for an hour on how detrimental they both are. I'm very well acquainted with the health hazards of cement dust, and I use the word cement because that is the real threat. We all know the ingredients required to manufacture concrete: water, cement, sand, rock. I have a basic knowledge of the industry from working at a concrete plant in Tampa for 18 years. I see great strides have been made in the industry because it was really needed. I have seen the effects of cement poisoning on the arms and hands of the concrete truck drivers. The paint on my vehicle was eaten away when the cement silo was overfilled, and cement filled the sky and settled everywhere. This happened more times than I care to remember. I had constant sinus and lung infections while working there. My best friend left before I did, and she is still living with chronic bronchitis. I left on the advice of my doctors, and I'm still living with respiratory issues and diminished hearing loss from the noise of concrete trucks being loaded off and on all day. Of course, Archer residents will not be that close proximity of the actual product, but will all be breathing the dust particles given the location of the proposed batch plant. I sold my home in Tampa and used my life savings to build a house that I had hoped would be my forever home. But I'm pretty certain that will not be the case now if a concrete batch plant is built just across the highway from my house. I take care of my own yard, and I'm outside as much as I am inside, and I do not look forward to breathing concrete dust in my remaining years. Archer needs the kind of businesses that will attract people, not drive them away. What Archer does not need is harmful, heavy industry within the city limits and residential neighborhoods. The concrete business is a loud and nasty business, and I believe you will come to regret your decision if you allow this batch plant to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. In the back there.
My name is Rose Aslanian, and I want to know where the sand is going to be trucked from and approximately how many truckloads of sand will be coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
My name is Jennifer Philpott, and I own a home just a few stone throws away from the old Maddox Foundry. Lived there for a while. My father lives there now, and he has pulmonary disease. It sounds like Mr. Arnold wants to be a good neighbor, which is awesome. Good plans, good ideas for a good future. That's the future. What is going to be there? What is going to, or who is going to keep an eye on things for us? Are your filters being changed the way they should be changed? How many trucks are coming through? At first it was 12 and only between 7 and 10. Well, business is picking up. Is this written in stone? You're only going to work from 7 to 10? How many trucks will there be? There may not be so much particulate pollution from the plant, but what about the trucks coming and going? And are those your trucks? Do you own them? Are you responsible for them? Do your guys follow your rules, or are they contracted out to someone else? Do they care about being a good neighbor? Other people have pointed out things that I don't have to repeat. The good friend back there with the news about what happened in Texas is horrible. Who's watching the good guys? They're so good. They're nice guys. They're not going to do us wrong. But one day, someone else is going to run that business. We're not Newberry. We've never been Newberry. They've been Newberry for 2 decades. Well, we've been Archer. We are not going to catch up to that. No matter if you put in a cement plant here, that's not going to happen. Newberry was ahead of us. They may want to be living over there because, well, that's Newberry. This is Archer. We're not going to have $135,000 homes button up against a concrete batch plant. Not going to ever happen. Not here, not now. And I am a little sad about all that beautiful woodland being cut down. I don't know who did that or why they did that. It doesn't look very nice, but I digress. We need to know what the future holds. This is a very nice plan. It's on paper. But in reality, when it's built, Who's gonna watch them? Remember the boat plant? Who watched that? Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, Karen Fiore. If you look on page 49 of your backup, it reads availability of and demand on public facilities under potable water impact. A few months ago when this board met, you had citizens, including the board, that talked about there was additional information and analysis that was needed for this water analysis on the potable water. This backup has not included any additional or updated analysis on the water. So the quick analysis that I did by doing some research, the number of employees that were stated by Mr. Arnold last meeting, as well as this meeting, was over the 12, which is the only analysis that has been done on the water analysis in your backup that you plan to check off on. So there's actually 24 to 25, I believe. So if you go on your 22.5 gallons per day, that's a 540 gallons right there. Your cement trucks will deliver the cement powder, and those trucks must be hosed off prior to returning to our public roads after delivering their load. So we heard today that they're going to use reclaimed water for that, but do we know that? Do we know that those trucks need to carry that water? I'm not 100% sure, but they hold 33 tons, and the silos, from my research, hold about 100 tons. So these trucks, assuming about 3 loads per silo, so you have about 6 a day, and I'm being very conservative right there, 125 gallons per truck, so that's 750 gallons just for those to clean those trucks. Those are the cement trucks that are delivering. Those are not the concrete trucks. And so then you have your concrete trucks. So the backup says the hours of operation, I believe, is somewhere between 6 and 4:30. I'm assuming that won't happen. You have your noise zone ordinance, what time you can start. So I'm being very conservative. I'm assuming about 2 trucks per hour, approximately for 8 hours. So that's about 16 trucks. So and if you do your research, each truck can hold about 400 to 800 gallons per truck. And to be conservative, I was just assuming 600 and assuming that some of that is going to be used to actually clean the vessels. And again, we heard that perhaps it's going to be used from the runoff water, but still I was being conservative. So right there, that's 9,600 gallons. Then you have the cleaning of the facilities. There's going to be spills. There's no way that you can tell me that there won't be spills. We heard that there would be a concrete slab put down, but there's going to be washing of that concrete slab. And the aggregates that are going to be on the ground, we know those have to be hosed off, but we even heard 24/7. Will the water and the runoff be enough to continue to 24/7 hose those down? So you cannot check off that box as a board.
That's time, Mr. Chair.
Next up.
Good evening. My name is Brett Fiore. I was going to give a bunch of statistical analysis and comparables on projects, but my wife used a lot of numbers, so I'm going to be speaking to hurting property values, and instead I'm just going to simply ask you to use common sense, something that's not super common nowadays. Everyone here has heard the old sayings of what realtors say, like Lori did, is the most important factor in buying and selling a house is location, location, location. And I want every person in this building to ask themselves the following question. If I presented you to offer to buy a property, the same exact house, at the same exact price, and I gave you one next to a cement batch plant, and I gave you one next to a vacant lot, honestly, what are you going to choose? That's for you to decide. Think about it. And for most people in this community, and this goes throughout our country, the biggest single largest component of accumulated wealth is the value of their property going up over long periods of time. most reasonable people wouldn't support endangering someone's Social Security or retirement. Why are we going to endanger something that's a bigger portion of most people's livelihood and for their retirement? The proposed conditional permit states that the project cannot adversely contribute to the deterioration of quality of life or property values in the immediate neighborhood. We are the immediate neighborhood. And if you use your common sense, you will have to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next. Okay, in the back.
How y'all doing? My name's Trevor. I guess my phone's ringing. Perfect timing.
Were you sworn in, sir?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Will you raise your right hand, please?
Yes.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And will you state your first and last name, please?
Yes. First name's Trevor. Last name's Cam.
Thank you.
I'm a fifth generation Floridian, and I grew up on an old small town on Highway 41 south of here, born in Tallahassee. It's really unique what you guys have here. I'm a blue collar guy, and I've done environmental, I've done about every industry you could do, civil, and it sucks what's happening to Florida right now. The development is out of control, and I know it's good money, business is booming. But what you guys have is really unique. It's one of the most historical towns, one of the first railroad towns in the state of Florida. And I love the fact that there's still dirt roads downtown with 100-year-old oak trees. I think the Newberry example is terrible, because what Newberry just did with destroying that 100-year-old oak hammock with probably an ancient Indian well on it, and for more McDonald's and for more CVS that are 2 miles down the road, it's really sad. You just poisoned your community with a farming and ranching community. So I picked Archer because of the fact that it's still stuck in time. There's still a wholesome and awesome black and white community that gets along very well. And it's beautiful. And I just think it's, although I support the jobs and I understand business is booming, but I don't think it's enough for a historic downtown that is so quaint with a piece of property and history that is just epic. I mean, you know, people, I think the whole thing that is the issue here is we're like, hey, what could the potential of that be? And because of the fact that y'all been fighting off the development, and there's not many places like this left. Newberry, I think, just sold out, and it's going to change overnight. My minor is urban regional planning, and I get really passionate about this because of the greed. And I think just simply that this small town, what y'all have, is there's not many left in the state of Florida. And I think we're just talking about, I don't necessarily think we're talking about a greed from a certain party. I think we're talking about that we just see a vision of what this place could be and the historical element to it to preserve it. And I think that's what everybody really is like, hey, this is like a bummer that it would be downtown when there's so much land elsewhere industrially. So I don't mean to get on the bad side of anybody. I just think it's really important that y'all see from an outsider, a good old Florida boy, what y'all actually have here and how y'all been fighting to preserve the small town feel. And that's important. Thank you.
All right, yeah.
My name is Brenda Skinner. I'm a resident of Archer. I'm a fourth-generation resident here in Archer. I moved back home 22 years ago. I've always loved this beautiful town and the people in it. I come before you today to ask that you consider the health and well-being of all of our citizens and our town as you make your decision. And as you do so, please consider several things. And I'm not going to rehash some of the stuff that's been up here. A concrete batch plant is not comparable to Maddox Foundry. I've heard a lot about Maddox Foundry was. Well, it has great history, But this is a different day and a different time. It's not the same emissions that there were then, or the output that Maddox Foundry was. We need to focus on the future while we remember the past. If you say yes to one industrial business of this nature in town, it sets a precedent for others to try and come in. We don't want our beautiful historic town to become known as the industrial hub of this area. Our roads are already in bad shape. The gentleman from the Regional Planning Board who spoke last week at the commission meeting has already indicated that State Road 24 is not scheduled to be widened until 2040, many years out. The additional traffic from these heavy trucks will further deteriorate our roads as traffic increases, with anticipated building projects in both Levy County and Alachua County for people going to work, shopping, etc. A lot of thought for people who are traveling on that road. For Mr. Arnold, I have a couple of questions. Who exactly is going to run the concrete batch plant? Mr. Arnold, one of his sons, or someone else? Do they have the experience with this particular kind of endeavor? Or will this be a learning experience for them? Will they subcontract to someone else to run it? Or will they sell to another company? I've seen this happen with industrial things. I'd like to thank everyone here for letting us finally hear what Mr. Arnold has to say. And to Mr. Arnold and those here, I'd like to thank them for coming and explaining to us what exactly it is that they want to bring in. I'm glad to finally find out what it is that they're proposing, because we've asked for explanations for the past few weeks. And please, consider carefully your recommendation going forward with the concrete batch plant in Archer. Thank you.
Let the lady in the yellow, she's been trying to get...
Nope, it's okay. There's plenty of time.
Good evening. My name is December McSherry. I've been a resident for 50 years, 52 years. Very involved in Archer. I was a city election clerk for a bit, and I was on an advisory committee to help the mayor review industrial uses in Archer over the last 40 years. I was very disturbed March 7th when I asked that we have a workshop to discuss what this proposal is, and the manager abruptly shouted at me and said, "We will not have a workshop." And he doesn't understand that Archer's been built on workshops. We've had 3 to 4 industrial accidents in this town of city of Archer, and the fire department was never able to handle putting out explosions or fires. And so the citizens of Archer came together, lots, hundreds, and we formed committees, and we worked on our comprehensive land use plan. And we actually created policies for natural groundwater aquifer recharge. It's objective 4.7. The city shall protect the function of natural groundwater recharge areas and natural drainage features. That's because the pollution would happen within weeks. The water table's at 20 feet below. Water table in Hawthorne is 300 feet below, so we're easily contaminated. The next policy, the city shall provide that during the development review process, all proposed development within the drainage basin of any designated priority water body shall be coordinated with the Swanee River Water Management District. They don't have a permit right now. All new development, redevelopment, and when expansion occurs, existing developed areas located within high aquifer recharge areas shall provide treatment of stormwater before it enters the Floridan aquifer. Now, I don't know how Mr. Arnold is going to treat contaminated cement, which it doesn't break down. It's cadmium and lead and arsenic and all sorts of things are made in that. It's untreatable. It stays there and it will get down into our aquifer. All new development, redevelopment, expansion occurs Existing developed areas located within the high recharge shall provide treatment of that stormwater before it gets to the aquifer. This shall be presumed to have been met by designing and construction of stormwater management system to control post-development water runoff rate and volume, and a water quality to not exceed pre-development
That's time, Mr.
runoff
Chair.
rate and volume of water quality. The city shall.
That's time. I'm
All right.
sorry.
Does anybody want to designate their time to me? I have to.
No, we're not gonna do that.
We don't do time designation.
All right, well, I had two more paragraphs.
Well. Now.
Hi, Denise Donaldson. I live within a mile of this proposed site. I moved down here from Pennsylvania 8 years ago because of this quaint little town, and I come from a place, blue-collar place in Pennsylvania, that was low socioeconomic, that was in bad industrial area. We've had, even just last year, a plant blew up because of the industrial, Palmer Candy, I don't know if you ever heard that, killed many people. The air pollution was horrible. The people were affected, our health was affected, and this is very similar. My question to Arnold Construction is, he's talked about 10 trucks a day. Well, on average, 10 trucks that they own to move the cement is a total of, on average, 75 trips per day. That doesn't include the offloading of the semis. So that's a lot of round trips, 75 trips per day on average. In addition, these trucks that are offloading, he talked about starting at 7 a.m., but these trucks may come in at 3 o'clock in the morning. Are they going to sit there and idle all night on the premises next to the neighbors, create all this noise, pollution because they're idling? How many will there be? In addition, someone had mentioned the air monitoring. Just because they get a permit from the state at the get-go, where are the air monitors for the citizens and who's going to be checking? Because as we all know, the state is not going to be checking frequently. This is a problem. There's a lot of elderly people here. There's a lot of children here. This is about their health, the citizens' health, and the quality of life. And someone earlier said it best. In all honesty, you cannot approve this permit if it reduces the quality of life in this city. And there has been nothing so far that has proven that it will not do just that. One of my other questions is, they talked about this wonderful air filter that they have for the trucks. I think it's called a bag house, where they load the trucks up. Who's cleaning those air filters? How do they get cleaned? How often do they get cleaned? And who's going to monitor those? Because if they're not working, how does that help the citizens of Archer? All I can say is, so far, as wonderful as the plan that they present, that's their job, is to put their best face on it for them. This is their livelihood. This is not our livelihood. Not only that, my last comment is the 15 to 25 people that they're going to hire, are they going to commit to hire Archer residents? Because otherwise, how does that help the people of Archer in jobs? So all I can say is, I am against this proposal, and I hope you guys in your common sense say nay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is David McSherry. I am sworn. I'm going to continue reading your comprehensive plan to you, just so you can make an informed decision of whether this project conforms to the laws of our city. I don't live in the city, but my boys went to school here. We played baseball here. We patronized all the businesses here. We've had a 52-year relationship with this town. I'm going to continue what December was reading. The city shall provide for the limitation of development and associated impervious surfaces and high groundwater recharge areas designated by the Swanee Water Management District to protect the recharge area. Another one. This is all policy, 4.7.4. The city shall prohibit the discharge of hazardous materials to all soils, groundwaters, and surface waters of the city. The city shall cooperate with the county in establishing a local listing of all producers of industrial, hazardous, and toxic materials and waste. This is a big deal. This has to be done. The city, another one, objective 4.4, the city shall participate with other public agencies to increase public awareness. Sorry, it's very small writing. In the nature, harmful effects, and proper disposal methods associated with all hazardous materials and hazardous waste through public information programs. Information on source reduction and recycling of hazardous materials and waste shall be made available. See, this is a lot of work for the city. You're going to have to spend money to conform to your own plan if this plant is built. All these things, you guys will have to hire people to carry out these lawful duties. The city shall be assigned a public information contact to answer questions, disseminate current information to the public, to provide information programs to schools, and to advise the commercial sector of the proper handling of hazardous materials. The city shall disseminate, information on hazardous waste, source reduction, and recycling to homeowners and things. This is all stuff you have to do, whether it's a business or anybody. If the city shall provide in coordination with the county local emergency planning coordination, acquire emergency response and cleanup capabilities for the uncontrolled or accidental. Am I almost done or something?
40 seconds.
Oh, okay, thank you. Anyway, it goes on. This is all in your rules. This is how you're supposed to operate a city. So I would say...
That's time, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, thank you very much. But you have industry, you're going to have people to watch it.
Thank you.
You have to have a real city if you're going to have hazardous materials everywhere.
Who's next up? Raise your hand. Okay, come on up. Yes, okay.
I have some materials for you. Can I? Sure. Who do I?
Do you need? Did you need some? You just want
No.
this one.
There's one. I think I only had one copy.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead. Good evening. My name is Lisa Renshaw. I'm a mom, business owner, and 20-year resident of Archer. As a wellness coach, I prioritize preventative health for my family and my community. Archer, cherished for its tranquility and natural surroundings, faces a critical juncture. The closure of the old Maddox Foundry presents an opportunity to envision a revitalized town. Many of us desire some growth, but not at the expense of our health, especially for our children and future generations. The CUP justification report states that Mr. Arnold suggests repurposing some of the area into shops and offices. That would be after the batch plant is built. Imagine sitting outside with pollution hanging overhead. We need economic development without compromising our air quality. Concrete is indeed found everywhere. The production of concrete near residential areas poses significant environmental and health concerns. It's the third largest industrial source of air pollution, emitting harmful CO2, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter, the dust. Claims of advanced emission filters promising a 99.9% reduction in particulate matter assumes that everything will be maintained perfectly. The reality is less assuring. The EPA studies reveal that particulate matter from batch plant emissions, including cement dust and silicate-based particles, are mostly fugitive in nature. This means they are not fully contained and can escape during the process of truck loading, material transfers, wind erosion. Studies show consistently that living near cement plants and concrete batch plants correlates with increased health risks. Fine particulates can be breathed in and lodge deep in the lungs, leading to a variety of health problems, including cancer, respiratory, and cardiovascular diseases. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable, as are those with existing lung diseases. Texas has put a moratorium on new concrete batch plants in place due to these very health concerns. This echoes our potential predicament in Archer. This is about safeguarding our community's well-being and adhering to our local government guidelines. This inherent risk to health poses a direct contradiction to Archer's land development code, which prioritizes citizen welfare, safety, and health, especially due to the proximity of homes, schools, parks, and churches within a 1-mile radius of the proposed batch plant. It is imperative that CUP 2301 for the concrete batch plant be disapproved. Upholding our community's health, safety, and long-term welfare must take precedence. The vision of a healthy, vibrant town where growth is harmonized with health is within our grasp if we prioritize sustainable development over short-term monetary and industrial gains. Let's seize this moment to shape a vibrant, thriving Archer that prioritizes clean air, health, and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Lori. I'm a citizen of Archer. I live at less than a mile from this concrete batch plant that's proposed. I see that the submitted conditional use permit is not correct. The potable water on there is not correct. The drainage impact is not correct. Also on page 51, the traffic impact is from a 2021 annual traffic count for Archer Road, and it was rated D, and D is approaching unstable flow. Speed slightly decreased as traffic volume slightly increases. Freedom to maneuver within the traffic stream is much more limited and driver comfort levels decrease. This also causes more accidents, and we all know there's a lot of accidents on Archer. They're not going to widen Archer Road till 2040, and I don't think that's acceptable. I think that's very dangerous with all the school buses and everything else on the roads. I also am aware that the Maddox Foundry is a historical preservation part of Alachua, and according to your city codes, your land development codes, they were supposed to do an application to the Historic Preservation Board, which was not done. And also there's supposed to be a formal public hearing. That was not done. So I don't think anything is meeting criteria for this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Good evening. What I just handed over is a copy of 239 signatures, with mine included, of people who have signed an online petition to ask you, the zoning board, and the city commission to say no to a batch plant in the middle of the town. We're saying no to the conditional permit for this plant or any other heavy industry that will negatively impact our way of life. The other day I saw a comment that read, "Oh, Archer is such a no town. They say no to everything." Well, I like to say that it's perfectly fine to say no to something that is wrong and something that's going to be bad for you. So when you say no to something, it's because you want to say yes to something else. And I think that this is about saying yes to something else, a better vision for Archer. So we're saying yes to our health, we're saying yes to less pollution, and we're saying yes to something better. So please consider these requests. Thank you.
So now, yeah.
Jessica Ray, I've already been sworn in. For full transparency, I do not live in the Archer city limits, but I do live in the Archer mailing zone. I'm a couple of miles from the city limits. I am here as a concerned citizen. As you may hear me coughing, I apologize for the cough, but this is what it sounds like to be a severe asthmatic. I gasp for my breath, and I want you to recognize as well that there are those of us who are around you in close proximity who do not have a vote within the Archer city limits, but we shop in your shops. We come to the hardware store. We come to the grocery store. I chose Archer about 2 years, a little over 2 years ago. I chose not to go to Newberry. I have a horse farm, and I was looking for a property. I could not live near the concrete plants and concrete batch plants in Newberry. I knew that. I had a fortunate opportunity to become a citizen of this area, even if not the city. And I love it here. I am a Florida native. I grew up in the Central Florida area. I'm a second generation. I saw firsthand with uncles who had worked phosphate pits what those types of areas do to people in the long term. I have serious concerns for the air quality. Air quality doesn't limit at the city limit sign. I will get that even though I do not live in the city limits. And I will have to make the very difficult choice as to whether to leave, and I may very well have to make that choice. Thank you for your time.
I have something to say real quick about the petition that was signed, because it's our knowledge. I just want everybody to be knowledgeable about it. Out of the 238 signatures, only about 10% are actually from the people of Archer. The rest of them are as far away as Belgium, Atlanta, all over the country, but only about. Ma'am, all I'm trying to do is let everybody be aware of the information that was given to us.
All right, we're not gonna have a back and forth.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I have a question. Mary Alford, isn't she our
Yes.
yeah, she's our commissioner. Her name is on here. Is she here tonight?
No.
Okay, that's,
And Mr. Vice Chair, just to clarify, everything that's provided to you today will be part of the public record regarding this meeting.
okay, while I was
Absolutely.
looking at it, I
Just
wanted
wanted to
everybody
reassure
to know
you
what I
that
was.
it'll also be there.
Bob Kosicki, citizen. There's been a lot said about all kinds of things. No growth here. Well, for 35 years I've lived here and been trying to get a sewer system in, and every time we got close, it failed. And then we did it, start again, do it again, do it again. Finally, we're going to get a sewer system, pairing it with Newberry, from what I understand, and that's supposed to be this year. So finally, we may get growth. I know what it's like to have a business in Archer and only have a septic tank running that restaurant. You can only do so much. And nobody's going to build out here with having a septic tank for a business and have any kind of business. The people that bought houses near the other batch plants, they knew it was there. We didn't know this was coming. I've lived here for 35 years. There wasn't a batch plant there. There was a foundry. That foundry didn't have trucks running in and out of it every day. They didn't pour every day. They blew a whistle 3 times a day so you knew something was going on there. Most of the time you didn't know because it was quiet. We did have garbage trucks here running up and down the roads one time, and we saw what the roads looked like after years of that. That didn't work out very well either. They're talking about the water there. Obviously, if you're washing down trucks, you got particulate matter, goes into these things. The water's going to be reused. Well, sooner or later, that stuff's got to build up with the particulate matter. It's got to go somewhere. Can't just sit there. One thing, we keep talking about money and how the people get money and, this place will give us more money. Well, I looked at some things online, And I went to the property appraiser, and I found that, let's just take Mr. Arnold's property across 24, and that's 10.39 acres. And there it says the improved value of that property was $379 and $348. And the land value is $73,094. Their trim for 2023 for that property was $11,091.48. Archer's value of that was $2,130. Doesn't look like much, does it? When you take his other two properties, Maddox and the property he has out in front of it, that was clear cut. That's 24.22 acres. And that is 6,000, yeah. County gets $6,971, Archer gets $1,500. And that's because the improved value of that property is zero. They got it down to zero. It used to be $843,000, and the land value is
That's time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Real numbers. Raise your hand. Step up. All right, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Bill Lewandowski, citizen of Archer. Because of time constraints, I will highlight a few of the problematic areas in the resolution before you. Let's start off with, quote, whereas the Planning and Zoning Board has determined and found that approval of said conditional use permit as described below will promote the public health, safety, morals, order, comfort, convenience, appearance, prosperity, or general welfare, unquote. This batch plant would do just the opposite, particularly in the areas of public health and safety. In addition to the testimony already provided regarding the serious negative environmental damage these plants are capable of doing, I have provided you copies of a peer-reviewed scientific paper that provides even more evidence of the negative health and environmental impacts of concrete batch plants that was mentioned earlier by another speaker. And now you have the entire study. This developer has claimed that he will use highly efficient filters to eliminate airborne particulate pollution. But like any other system, that will require these filters to be properly installed and then properly operated and maintained throughout the entire operating life of the plant, and that there are never any human errors, system breakdowns, or shortcuts in plant operations. This developer does have a history of taking shortcuts. In 2014, OSHA cited Ariano Construction with 1 willful and 2 serious safety violations. Many of the speakers this evening have already pointed out numerous issues with the developer's application, which caused it to fail to satisfy the code and comprehensive plan. In addition, there is nothing in the record available to the public this evening that a Phase 1 environmental site assessment was ever performed to assess if historical property uses have impacted the soil or groundwater beneath the property in a way that could pose a threat to environmental and/or human health. This is a very different study from the one discussed by the developer earlier. Given the history of the site, it is prudent that the more advanced Phase 2 study be performed, as contaminated soil disturbed during the construction and operation of the site could contaminate our water supply. It is also important to note that the developer withdrew the application for an environmental resource permit on July 9th that was previously submitted to the Suwannee River Management District. If you've heard nothing else tonight, you have heard clearly and passionately from members of our community that this project will adversely impact both quality of life and property values. And after all, who selects concrete batch plant as an amenity, particularly in the center of a town, when searching for a new home on Zillow? In addition, the developer's claims and allusions as to how this project will magically improve the fortunes of Archer is pure marketing hype. In conclusion, despite the developer's assertions of marketing hype, this conditional use permit does not fully meet the requirements of the Land Development Code or the comprehensive plan. As such, you are duty-bound to recommend to the City Commission that you disapprove it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
I just want to clarify something. When Maddox Foundry was built there, and Green, in 1900, about 1900, 23, It was not even in the city, because the city at that time was section 16, and if you've seen any of these parcels, it's section 17, because it wasn't in the city. So it's on, and then when the city limits was extended, 24 was approximately the city limits, and so it was on the north side of town. All of our industrial is on the north side of town, of that town now, but we've taken in so much acreage out that way that you look at our big map, the big map over here on the wall, and you see where we're extending it, and we've even extended it more out to the north, southeast, I think. It looks like in the middle of town, but historically it was not in town at all.
Thank you. Nice to hear people. Next up.
Yeah.
Good evening, Roberta Lopez, former mayor and commissioner of Archer. I am concerned about the retention pond that's on 174th. If you go down past the fire station, and of course Santa Fe is, Mr. Arnold's property is right there on 174th and Archer Road. And on the other side, we have Santa Fe College. And if you go north on 174th, it takes you straight into Holly Hills, which is probably a good 6 blocks down the road past his property. I'm concerned about Holly Hills. It's a low-income area. It will impact the value of their homes, and they're already impacted because it is a low-income area. I've always been a protector of that area, and I am concerned about that pond, the water going into that pond. I don't know if it's going to be milky white or black. So I'd like to know the water that's going into this huge pond, what color is it, what is it going to look like, and what is it going to smell like? That pond has been there for quite some time now, since Mr. Arnold constructed it. And I have seen it overflow almost with water when we had 4 or 5 days of rain. So if we have that much rain that will fill it up, what's going to happen when all the water is pumped into that retention pond? I'm really concerned about that, but more importantly, I'm concerned about Holly Hills being so close to that. I'm concerned about the students at Santa Fe College. From what I understand, it's about 15 feet from the property to the Archer City well, if I'm not mistaken. 1,500 or something like that. It's very, very close, so you need to consider that as well. So I remember some time ago when Mr. Arnold was doing his property, he brought loads and loads of dirt straight down 129th and Holly Hills to put all that dirt to build that property up, until I had to tell him, please put a net or something over the trucks because it was all sand. And you can't imagine how much sand was brought through there, and it came straight through those people's property. I'm just hoping that whatever he does, he takes better care of that than what he did in that small community.
Anyone else?
Okay, I'm Ronnie Arnold. I'm a local site work road building contractor, and we're looking to put a concrete batch on Maddox property, which we meet all the qualifications. But you know, we've all heard, and I mentioned this Monday night about misinformation. Most of it is just BS, okay? First I'll address the young man come up here and talked about Texas. Well, we're in Florida, but he talked about Texas. So he talks about Houston. So he doesn't really go into the article correctly. They have had a problem in Houston. They have a lot of plants in Houston. They weren't being regulated. So Texas went ahead and they set up in the past 3-4 years, it's in the article, it'll talk about until it gives the abbreviation. But they went ahead and put all of these regulations on these plants, and they had to meet the dust criteria or they would shut them down. This Florida has the FDO, the Florida Department of Environmental Regulation. You have to get a permit from them. They can come out and check you at any time. On an annual basis, they do a visual emissions test. So I have to pay someone come out to the plant and they do a test. And then the Department of Environmental Regulation, they come along and they do their test. Okay? If we were to have a spill and it went anywhere and they come out and they find it, they would shut you down. You'd be out of business. It's not going to happen with that plant because of the arrestor system. Back to Texas. If he had gone ahead and read that article, it really was talking about crushing concrete. It's crushing concrete. So that, in addition to their concrete plant, over here, they are recycling the concrete by crushing it. We have a crushing operation to the west of us. And actually, to be honest, we have gone to certain areas and we've set up crushers, but you have to meet the guidelines of the Florida Department of Environmental Regulations there. So it's like demoing a house. You've got to have a water truck there, and you got to be soaking everything all the time. It's got to be soaking. You can't be putting dust or anything that's going to go over, and just like water runoff, it can't go over on the neighbor's property. So you just don't go out and crush anything if you don't have a base to keep it wet. Okay? Well, he talked about the problem in Houston. Well, I'm repeating myself, but Texas has got on that. Florida's way ahead with the Florida Department of Environmental Regulation. They would come out and shut it down in a minute. Now,
That's time, Mr. Chair.
Pardon?
That's time.
Well, I got to have more time. I'm the one putting on the show.
Everybody else gets some more time.
Okay. So you're not going to let me address the man getting up here and saying that we were willful? Will you address it?
It's later on. It's later on. This is the public comment section.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah? Anyone? Okay. About to close off public discussion. All right, it is now closed.
All right, Mr. Chair, next is applicant rebuttal. So now is your opportunity to rebut anything that you heard during public comment or the discussion in the board.
Now you can do.
Okay. Thank you. I don't mean to get excited. I just want honesty. I'm honest, and anyone that knows us and our business integrity. But I'll start off with a personal attack on our business. Okay. There was an accident at Depot Park, and they blew it up. Okay, they blew it up. They pushed OSHA into charging me with willful, and there was then a lesser charge. Willful is in essence where the accident happened because we let it happen. Okay, so OSHA goes out there and they charge us, and then we do the appeal. We go over to Jacksonville and we give them a letter of appeal. So then the attorney a United States attorney from Atlanta comes here with our lawyers in the office, and she's going to have the OSHA people, and you're going to have the city people there. All right. Bottom line is, when she was done, after we give testimony, and the pictures that they showed was 1 hour off. So when the actual picture that was in the paper showed that we had it properly sloped. So we were totally within compliance of the OSHA. So she went ahead and, like, one of the OSHA men was there, and I asked him right there, I said, would you have charged us with willful? He said no. And then the lady talked to one of my other sons that was there, and then they showed the photos. Anyway, the willful went away, and they actually dropped it all the way down to where there was someone standing on a box, a box that you put in, a trench box that was standing up there hooking on a cable, and we had to pay a little fine for that. That's the fact on that. So I don't like putting down that we were willful, because that's just never happened. We've never, ever had any other thing to do with
What incident
with
are
OSHA.
you talking about? I'm unaware of the incident you're describing.
7 years ago, there was an incident where we had set a very large structure. So we had to pour concrete around the base of the structure. It was to keep it from floating up. Okay, well, we did that, but there was a big pipe, an active pipe that was there, and unbeknownst to us, that pipe, we didn't put it in, but that existing pipe was leaking. So it came down and it pushed material, and there was a young man there that failed to get out of the way. He was told to get out of the way once we saw the water, and he failed to get out of the way, and he got hurt, okay? And so they made a big deal out of it, and we were in compliance. We were totally in compliance, and they found it as such.
Okay, I was just curious if what you were talking about was
No.
anything to do with
I haven't-
concrete batch
He was
plant.
rebutting somebody.
Yeah, okay, but I was trying to get up to speed because I didn't know the incident you were talking about.
And to go on that fact, they built Depot Park, one of the most premier areas and proud examples in the city of Gainesville of a city parking that whole area, and it turned out really great. So,
I mean, the bottom line, people don't know that there was something going on between me and the project manager on that job, and so we end up in a big fuss, and the city turned around and had to pay me $1.2 million. So they had to pay for a lot of what they put out there. And I don't even like to talk about it, but I got my $1.2 million. And I think I mentioned the Texas thing about the crushing. That he fails to mention the crushing. Now I now got to address Ms. Lopez. We have never run a dump truck down through that subdivision over. Never. And we never take a loaded truck that isn't covered. I wouldn't even have, Phil Pitts is this way. You wouldn't go through a neighborhood. You just wouldn't go through a neighborhood. It's like there'll never be a concrete truck go through a neighbor here. But she went on to say she's seen that pond flood. The pond, there's two ponds. They have never flooded. They are dry ponds. They percolate within 24 hours. They have never more than half filled. Those two ponds. They're actually over-designed. But because they were over-designed, now it's going to be beneficial because FDOT, if they're not good ponds, FDOT wouldn't go ahead and say, hey, will you go ahead and put a pipe under the highway, intercept our water to put over in your property? So back to, I don't want to get personal, but three times, a certain individual here that was just up here turned us into the Department of Environmental Regulation. And anyone can do that. And they come out right away. So they come around and they walk our whole site. And she said, there's nothing wrong. So she did it again. There's nothing wrong. Came back a third time. There's nothing wrong. So she told that certain person, don't call anymore about the Arnold property. We've been there, they are in compliance. We're in compliance with our fuel tanks, we're in compliance with recycling, having a company come in and pick up the oil to recycle it. Another thing that I got to mention, at the plant, okay, we did a phase 1, we did a phase 2 environmental. They had already done that 5 or 6 years ago. So that's where they go down and they check the water table and all of that. $15,000, that was just one of them. Then he mentioned that we had an environmental company, that's all they do. They come out, he charged $3,000 or $4,000 to go out and go over the property. All he could find was cats, okay? Then we had testing to come out, and they actually, all those mounds of dirt that they used in the process of molding metal, they tested that material. There's nothing wrong with the material. It's all in big globs, but it can actually be put in a crusher. It will crush it right out. It's just sand, and then you can actually use it for about anything because it's already been tested. It's fine. So we've done that, and then when GSE come over, GSE, that's Ken Hill's environmental company, we did a visual. So you walk all around all of Maddie's. So there were barrels there, barrels that had liquids in them, and then there were other that had liquid, and then there might have been 30 barrels, and then but they weren't leaking. There was a liquid in it. Then they had the material that you would cast on the floor if you were soaking up a grease or a hydraulic oil, where they had barrels of that. So we paid, I don't know, $6,000-7,000 for a company, environmental company, to come in and load all that stuff and carry it out. So
You've cleaned up the whole site.
we've cleaned, and in the past years when we had, past year that we had time, we went ahead, we started collecting up metal. You can, in one of the photos, it shows you metal everywhere. So we've been cleaning that up. But no, we haven't. We haven't done anything on the buildings because we can only do so much. Not to mention the fact that this past year I've had two back surgeries, and then I had another surgery 3 weeks ago. So, and I'm the one that leads this on this. And I'm the only one that corresponds with them because my sons have been busy running the site work road building business. Okay, and I don't know what else to say. There's just the gentleman, this one gentleman that was up here a while ago, when he come in here Monday night, the first thing he did was, oh, you got to put the moratorium back on because here's the picture. Well, it's the Florida Rock plant. It's the Florida Rock plant. It's a cement plant. The guidelines are so strict on, I wish we had shown you more of the video, because you can watch the video. You're not going to see any dust coming off that plant. And you asked about the tanker. The tanker comes in, they hook up a hose to the silo, and then it's pumped into the silo. And then it's in that pipe, that's sectioned in between the truck and the silo. If there's anything in it, he can suck it. If there's any in it, he can suck it right back in. So when he unbuckles it, it's not going to spill on the ground. I mean, these people are professional, and even those trucks, you got cement tankers right over here. There's probably 15, 20 of them. They come in and out of there. They have to meet the guidelines. They have to meet the guidelines, same as I would have to. And I'll probably have them deliver cement. And the trucks, once they do get loaded, they'll go over to a little area right there where you'll take a hose and they'll wash it down. It'll go down and it goes right into the
recycling system.
The recycling system. So everything's clean, and there's not going to be dust. If there was dust, I would never open myself up to a lawsuit if I thought there was possibility of dust and the neighbors having a problem with the noise or the dust. I don't know what else to say. We need to comply. We comply with everything. Thank you.
And I'll just add a couple more things from
Yes. Citizens in the audience, if you need to carry on a conversation, would you take it outside? Thank you. So you're going to address the question?
Yes, I realize. I'm just going to very quickly go through the high points. Okay. We talk about trucks per day and the concern about the traffic level of that roadway. While FDOT has their own complete process for that, and of course they've determined when they want to do widening on that roadway per their specifications, and they have a whole manual as far as traffic generation and widening and turn lanes and everything else associated with roadway design that they're going to hold us strictly to for that whole driveway permit. The change in type of industrial use is not relevant in the code. It's just about whether or not it's industrial use or not on the property. And what we're really talking about with this application is whether we meet the performance standards. And then whether or not the city could allow this property to be sold or not. Well, the way that a city would regulate use would be to change the zoning, change the comprehensive plan, value these items, and instead the zoning is as it is, and we're an allowed use on this property as a manufacturing use. I'll skip the stuff about Houston and Texas because, again, Texas follows their own rules and they do odd things that Florida never has let happen. Talking about water into the retention pond. So all of the criteria listed by the citizen was absolutely correct, and the Water Management District is holding us to all of those criteria. I design ponds for all uses across North Florida for all the projects I work on, and the water quality going to the aquifer and the recharge and protecting that resource is a high level for the Water Management District. And they handle that at the state level and review all those projects coming through them. Who owns the trucks? They'll be owned by Ronnie Arnold. You know, there's the ones that actually have the concrete that will be delivered to the sites. And will there be enough water? You know, I think one comment was about maybe it's 9,600 gallons a day. Well, my house, we use $6,000 a month, 1,000 gallons a month just for taking showers in the mornings and after use and stuff like that. So that is not a lot of use. A restaurant would probably use more than our entire plant in a year on its own. You know, talking about wanting to keep a small town, I understand that. You know, I understand the appeal of having the small town, but the problem with the small town is it has to maintain. It can't be in decline this whole time. And unfortunately, the patterns look like that decline is happening, and this small town could slip out of the fingers of your community over time. And trying to bring that in by a mixture of businesses, you know, there's just not one kind of city. A city is made up of multiple uses, multiple peoples, multiple types of citizens and businesses working together with an eclectic mix of that to support everyone and support everyone. It's that diversity that keeps small towns working and moving forward. And this is not out-of-town developers. This is one of your local citizens doing this, who lives and works and owns a business and property within the city limits. Are they going to hire local people? Well, you see your city limits. I'm sure someone's going to live generally outside it, and a lot of these people that are here that are concerned today don't live technically within the city limits, but they consider themselves part of the city Archer, and those are the people we're going to be hiring, the people who will want to work here on this property. We already talked about how we meet Suwannee River Water Management District criteria, and just emphasizing again how there's so many criteria elements that the Water Management District will be holding us to. Going into about operating procedures. So Ronnie Arnold and them are paying a lot of money for this equipment, all right? And it's designed to operate efficiently. And what that also means is to operate so it operates to make money for the property. When you don't follow those guidelines, the equipment then wastes material, puts a little bit too much in the mix, kind of messes it up. You then have to dump it and maybe start again. So there's so much incentive to keep this equipment operating and within the parameters that the manufacturer specifies. So there's a lot of incentive to operate this properly on its own, let alone all of the inspections and requirements that they would have to meet on top of those requirements. And let's see. And where does the water go? You know, so we talked about how we're using so much recycling of the water to keep all those piles wet, and of course a lot of that evaporates over time. But then with that sequence of those stormwater ponds, if we happen to have 2 hurricanes in a row, which is what we designed for 18 inches of rain over that entire drainage area, and you saw all the area that it included. Some of that soaks into the ground and some of that runs off. And the portion that runs off, we then have to hold, and then we put it from stormwater pond to stormwater pond, and each of them only lets a certain quantity from one to the other, while the rest of it gets held. And that is the water quality portion, that's the treatment portion of the stormwater pond facility. So we're going to have, instead of just one pond, a train of ponds, and we call that in our civil engineering talk, a treatment train. It's a train of treatment from one to the other as we go down the hill from the concrete batch plant to the stormwater pond on just northeast of the plant itself, and then as we cross Archer Road, that's the last portion of it. So we're going to have 3 opportunities, 4 if you consider the actual sediment basin itself, for treatment on that runoff water. And I can get to more details, but I don't think there's really anything unless you have any specific questions. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for your time. I'm sorry, Mr. Arnold would like to add more.
I have one last point. I talked about Texas, and if you go into the articles, you'll see that they didn't go ahead and when they talked about Texas, they didn't go ahead and clarify the whole article as to crushing rock and all of that. But the biggest thing is, and it happened Monday night, and it happened then again here tonight, where they come in and they tell you the Lieutenant Dan Patrick asked Texas Environmental Agency on April the 16th to immediately stop issuing permits for cement production plants. Argos plant in Newberry, production plants. For instance, here Patrick cited the concerns of a proposed 600-acre cement kiln, Grayson County, north of Dallas, for a cement plant. So they're good folks, but they still can't get over the fact that we're not a cement plant.
Intelligent people in the city of Archer, I'm just letting you know, sir.
I'm sorry?
We've done research. There are
Mr. Chair.
Well, you know, okay, I wish someone would come up here and cite what the Florida Department of Environmental Regulation has cited a concrete batch plant in Florida. I would like to see them come up, pull it up, and show us where someone has been cited that they didn't comply with or that they were shut down. We're in Florida, we're not in Texas, but I've already explained the situation on Texas. They just didn't make it clear. You know, I think we've given you everything. You've heard people talk, and they tell. I guess this person lives in Archer, but she has. I welcome her to come up here and tell you where the Florida Environmental has shut down a concrete batch plant or been cited.
All right. If that's the end of the applicant's rebuttal, we now have.
Answer my question.
This is not a back and forth. If that's the end of the applicant's rebuttal, it is an opportunity for any staff rebuttal. Do you have anything, Tony?
Mr. Chair, before we get into your side of business, I just wanted to enter into the record that I received an email this afternoon from Bob Smallwood, who is not available to be here because he's out of town. His address is 17525 103rd Place in Archer. I'm not going to read his entire email, but I'm basically going to summarize, and he has cited basically everything that everybody else has talked about today, pollution, health, traffic, things of that nature, and he just wanted me to voice his concerns about the project as well. And I just wanted to enter that into the record.
Yes, that'll be entered into the record. Anything else, Tony?
No, ma'am.
All right, if that's the end of staff rebuttal, it is now time for your deliberation and a motion as appropriate.
Make the motion.
You could pass the gavel if you chose to the vice chair to make a motion. Is there any discussion? You can also discuss. You don't have to immediately make a
Guys,
motion.
really want to have a third hearing on this? Didn't make a motion, we deny it.
You're gonna make no motion, we don't make a motion, it dies.
Okay, just before we go into any further, I'm going to make a couple of clarifications just so that we're all on the same page. And to give everyone some time to consider their thoughts after all that information. Again, to clarify, the recommendation that I made at the beginning of the meeting regarding Ms. Green was based on my understanding of the Florida rules of ethics and on nothing else. Again, I can't force anyone to do anything, but that's my recommendation based on my evaluation of the law. Competent substantial evidence is what you have to consider today in making a determination on this resolution. This board, the applicant was correct when they indicated that this decision that you make tonight is whether this project meets performance standards. This is an allowed use if they have a conditional use permit. We are not and cannot litigate whether or not it should be an allowed use. So we are just taking a look at whether or not this meets performance standards. The other thing very important to consider is that this is a recommendation only. This will go to the City Commission, whether you recommend or do not recommend for this to go forward, ultimately. I'm happy to answer any legal questions anyone has.
Linda Kosicki, I have a question. What about a failure to comply with any of the 5 development codes or whatever we've got here? If any one of these we feel is not being met, we cannot say yes to this. Do I understand that correctly?
If you, and I need to look at exactly what you're looking at. But as long as you're considering the performance standards and the code of the City of Archer regarding same, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Yes, so this is just for the record, this is section 7.06, conditional use permits. And it states the conditional use permit shall be granted by the City Commission unless it is found to, and then it states A, B, C, D, E. These are the factors that you are to consider. I'm happy to.
Can they bring those back up on the screen, please?
Yeah, those should be them there. Deanna, are you able to zoom in a little bit? Those are kind of small there. Thank you so much.
That's why I had to write them so big.
Okay. There you are. Okay, so these are the factors that you're supposed to take a look at. So yes, if you find that the conditional use permit application does not meet these factors, then your recommendation should be that the City Commission denies. So it'll be a recommendation to the City Commission to approve or deny.
Okay, gentlemen, what is your conclusion? Is there going to be a resolution to be made? All right, that's the wrong word. Oh, yes, it is the right word. I would like to read the 5 items. The applicant may amend the application at any time prior to consideration by the City Commission. But A, if there's a fail to comply with land development code. B, pose a danger to public health and safety. C, pose a substantial adverse impact on adjacent property values. D, be substantially out of character with the existing neighborhood. And E, conflict with the comprehensive plan. I have problems with 3 of them.
Well, I am concerned about the deterioration of the quality of life and property. I think they have a good plan, but I worry about location.
Linda Kosicki, I think everybody is concerned about location. We're not talking about miles away. We're talking about 3 blocks, 2 blocks. The backyard is right there, feet away. Nobody is going to be able to sell their property. We have invested our entire lives in our houses in this small town, and we'd like to keep it. We'd like to keep some growth here, but we would like to keep it a small town. We like knowing our neighbors. We like knowing what's going on. We like to participate in 4th of July and other things that are happening here. We don't want the kind of growth that we feel like it's going to get out of hand. You might start at 5 acres, but what makes you? I know you say all these wonderful things. I don't believe you. It's that simple. I do not believe you. We all breathe. We all breathe.
I'm still contemplating on what I'm getting ready to say. And I'll say this on record, based on the duties of what I'm supposed to do here. I'm supposed to not go on emotion. I'm supposed to go on the facts that are presented to me. And what's going through my mind right now are just the facts being presented and then the emotions of less than a dozen citizens that have showed up tonight. Less than, 22 citizens that have showed up tonight.
There's 50 seats here.
Why are you saying that's just emotion? You don't think there was any fact?
Mr. Chair, point of order.
You done?
No. But I have to just base everything on the actual facts, not opinions of what was brought tonight. And I'm reading these 5 sentences over and over again right now. After the last meeting that we had that was cut short, and I'm speaking directly to the board and the attorney, I did drive to the other 3 concrete batch plants that I have, that I could find on Google. And personally, from what I saw, from what I was being told, and what I expected to see was 2 different things. What I did see was not everything covered in dust. I tried to speak to the adjacent school that is right next door to it, and they could not speak to me. There is a very expensive apartment complex that is directly adjacent to the back, I would say less than 250 feet from the actual silo. I visited three of those locations at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then again just before lunch. Again, what I expected to see and what I saw were 2 completely different things. The issue that I'm having right now is basically the property value. As far as the health and the dust, I can also say that Shands Medical Center is less than a half a mile away from a batch plant. But when it goes upon to the property values, where I did see them, I did see residential. It wasn't the nicest residential. I did see some newer construction, but it wasn't newer construction where people were building homes. It was mainly apartment complexes. I did see a lot of commercial business that was vacant. I did see commercial businesses there, but I also saw a lot of vacant commercial property as well. I think Mr. Arnold has done a fantastic job of pleading his case. The one part that I have an issue with is just the to affect the actual property value of the surrounding land. I mean, personally, all the property that I own in this town, well, is commercial and residential. I'm not making any decisions up here based on my own personal feelings, just based on what I can see. So,
Sean,
yeah.
do you think it's not out of character with the existing neighborhood? You think that that's in character with a small town with houses all around?
We're not completely changing the zoning of the property.
No, I'm not
giving
talking
it a
about
special-
zoning, I'm talking about what they're doing, you know, the different, it's like apples to oranges. You cannot compare Maddox to what they're planning on doing at all.
No, and I can also say that a lot of it will not be seen from the street, based on their buffers and their fences, based off of the facts that were presented tonight. The majority of people will not even know it's there. I don't see the affected health risks that people are concerned about. I mean, based on the facts presented tonight.
Yeah, they're only annually, once a year, really have to be inspected. I mean, legally, that's what they do. They inspect annually. And they can jump in there and actually make sure the bag houses are clean or whatever they call them. I drove a rock truck. I drove a sand wagon for 3 years. I know a little bit about sand, but that was mid-Florida and the passion plant. So it was different, but yet I did learn a little bit. And I had a restaurant for 9 years. So I know how much water we use. You know that. So, yeah, there's a couple of inconsistencies, but yeah, great presentation. Do I buy it? No.
I mean, whether I buy it or not, it's facts that were presented. Engineers have signed off on it. Engineers stake their
Engineers do not live here, blocks away. They don't live in this city. We live in this city. And I know that sounds really emotional, but we live here. We've sunk everything we have in a house across the street that's 3 blocks away from this. Yeah, I'm a real personal in this, but I've tried to keep an open mind. I've heard everything that's out there, and I just can't say it's good for Archer. I can't say it. Knowing it's going to destroy everybody out there for what they're valued, how can I say yes?
I'm not saying it's good for Archer. What I'm saying is based on the facts presented according to these 5 guidelines.
Well, what are we supposed to do? Have it good for Newberry? I don't give a about Newberry. I care about Archer.
I obviously care about Archer.
Right,
Again,
you're here.
I have invested a lot into this town, and even though I wasn't one of the people I own property adjacent to this property as well. But what I'm looking at is what I'm seeing on there based on the facts that were presented tonight. And facts that I can physically see, that I physically saw with my own eyes. I talked to people who live next door to the big batch plant that is a half a mile from Shands. A lot of people said that they didn't even know what it was. That they just get up and go to school, they get up and go to work, that they just, whether they didn't care or whatever. Was that something important? Okay. Fire alarm? But what I'm saying is the businesses that I went to that were on a 2-lane road with a median where these trucks are going in and out of. Yeah, well, no, I'm talking about the 3 that are in Gainesville. Yeah, the three that were the closest here. I wasn't trying to compare. I was talking I wasn't looking at rural area. I was looking at the concrete batch plants that were literally in the heart of the largest city that we live next to. And there's literally a batch plant a half a mile from Shands. And they're on 2-lane roads with medians.
Okay, listen, all this discussion is what we're supposed to have with a motion on the floor. There is no motion on the floor. Let me just say this. The purpose of this hearing, the purpose of this board is not to deny or approve this conditional use permit. It's only to pass on to the commission whether we think it is a viable issue for them to discuss and to vote on it. And if we're not going to have a motion, we don't need all this discussion. I'm sorry. This part of the meeting is over. If we're not going to make a motion, this hearing is over. All right. There's no further new business. There's no old business. Now it's time for any public comment on an issue other than the batch plant that concerns the Planning and Zoning Board.
Mr. Chair, just briefly before we go there.
That's right.
Not to derail us, but before we go there, just so that everyone's aware, because you all are required by the code to either make a recommendation for or against. I'm seeing some movement over here. Is that me hearing a motion?
I would make a motion that we vote to recommend that the commission denies the permit.
That isn't protocol. You have to make the motion. Somebody seconds.
Right.
He made the motion.
I made the motion.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
All right. Now you can have that discussion you wanted to have.
I don't think we
If you
have
still
been.
want to have it, or we can vote.
Think we have been.
All right, the motion's on the floor that we not approve this resolution. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand.
Okay, it's dead.
Right, it will be passed on to the city commission as a non-recommendation, so recommendation to deny.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I could not say this.
Do we have any public comment on any issue other than this? All right, let's please, we still have a meeting going on. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, thank you.
Ann Green.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, excuse me, I thought you said.
So moved.
I think that there was someone to give public comment on general.
Oh, did you have something on an issue other than the... Ms. Ann Green, do you have an issue?
I do.
Not on the batch plant.
No, it's not on the batch plant. Okay, I want to know specifically why I'm the conflict of interest. It's not just of your opinion or the ethics board. What is the opinion? What is it specifically?
The opinion is that based on your relationship to an individual who could have a special pecuniary interest, whose pecuniary interest could be affected by the result of the vote, my recommendation was that you recuse yourself.
What does that mean? Does that mean I might buy concrete? Or I might make money from their concrete?
That you could, or someone that you are related to could, have a financial benefit if this concrete plant were to come in.
That makes about as much sense as going to Save-A-Lot and buying on sale. I have an interest in Save-A-Lot. There's no connection.
Yeah. I'm a little confused. Bill Lewandowski, citizen, yeah. So I'm a little confused about procedure tonight. So it would be really helpful to me to understand what procedures are. So for example, how long does the developer have to speak? Can an agent outside of the developer speak outside of that? So, I mean, you're locking down the citizens 3 minutes, which is understandable. There's a lot of people here speaking, they want to go crazy. But on the other hand, it's also fair to say, well, how long does the developer have to say at the beginning, and how much rebuttal time does the developer have? Because the guy was up here for a long time.
There's no time limit.
And so that's my question.
Under Florida law, there is no time limit.
Okay.
Time limit is only for the citizen input.
Okay.
That portion of the hearing.
Can you have a policy on this so that it's fair for everybody, so everybody knows the ground rules? Can you have a policy?
I would, no.
You can. Okay, all right, thank you. All right.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved to second, we adjourn. Meeting is now over at 9:28. Thank you all for coming and sharing your opinions. Thank you all. I'm sorry?